No, that's okay. I don't want to know. I don't want to.
I'll get it.
You ready? All right, so we'll open the meeting, and we'll open it with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could stand and join us, please. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any public comments this evening? I don't see any of our typical public commenters, so no public comments. Next order of business is acceptance of minutes. I make a motion that we move to accept and approve the meeting minutes of September 5th, 2018 as shown. Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions in regards to the minutes of September 5th's meeting? Okay,
I
then,
don't think so.
all right. All those in favor of accepting? Okay. Correspondences, A through E, there was 5. I make a motion that we move to accept and approve the 5 correspondences as presented, A through E. Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments on the
I have
5?
one comment, question, whatnot, about the, what? About the outreach meeting. I mean, I guess they did the same thing. I was just looking up, they did a similar outreach meeting when they did it in Acton, and I guess they did it on a Thursday also. I guess the concern is, you know, who's going to be able to show up on 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning if they want to hear more about it.
I believe they said they were going to do a series of them when we were
Yeah.
there, and that was just the
I might have
first.
forgotten that one.
No, and I don't think they've publicized any others, because I thought the same thing when we were there. Like, you know, the majority of people are going to be dealing with children or at work during the day, so
Right.
the most productive time would be like a 7 o'clock at night.
So we are not, it's very loud. I'm relatively hands-off. I want to make sure that at least they were meeting their legal obligation, and that's why
Right,
I
right,
asked for of legal counsel, and
Yeah.
we are. So it's their responsibility to host it and to meet
And to meet that.
to meet their legal obligations, and they are doing that. So
Okay.
Yeah, to Melissa's point, that was something that she talked about when we met there, that they were going to, you know, they will be hosting a series of meetings. That was just the first one, so.
Okay.
sure, and I think you would be right to ask them about that.
Yeah.
And if they want to be a good partnership with the town, then they need to.
Be able
They need to
hear
follow through.
Other people, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Right. That's all I had.
Does anybody else have any questions about the 5 correspondence items? The other 4? All those in favor of accepting? Thank you. The consent agenda this week. 3 items. I make a motion that we move to and accept the list of 3 consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Anybody have any comments or concerns about those 3 items?
No.
Okay.
So I'm gathering this carnival is gonna have rides and all kinds of stuff
It's like a regular,
Regular.
what they had last year.
last year.
And only one of the 3 days will have alcohol, as it says
Alcohol,
there,
right.
so.
And that won't be there, right? That'll just
It'll
be,
up-
that'll be the
I think it'll be
Oktoberfest in the back.
Down by
Well,
the tent like last year.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they had it like roped off, I think.
Yeah.
yeah.
Separate.
Right.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay.
I'm abstaining because I'm associated with one of the items in the,
We're
Oh, okay.
reappointing you.
Okay, yeah, okay.
The you a distributor?
No, I'm associated with one of the other items on the consent agenda. I'm being reappointed to a
I
committee.
got you.
Okay. Next up is appointment to the cultural council, and the appointment is for Sarah Lundberg. And the motion is that we move to appoint Sarah Lundberg to the cultural council for a term to expire June 30th, 2020. Do you have a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead. You got it.
Somebody second.
Okay,
How are you?
Good, thanks.
so. All right, does anybody have any questions for Sarah in regards to?
I'm very excited about your experience with grant writing.
Yeah, thank you.
Whenever I see that,
Yeah.
it's a great thing.
On the other end of it, I've never been approving grants, so it'd be exciting to learn about that end.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Anything else? David?
No, my only comment is I think you're coming in to the cultural council at a really exciting time.
Yeah.
One of the most active and enthusiastic groups that
Mhm.
that we've got in town. So I'm sure you'll find it, fun.
Yes, I hope so. I think so. I agree.
Have you gone to the meetings yet?
I have. I've been to a couple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately I went on vacation for 2 weeks, so I missed a few, but I have gone to a couple. So my
She's come in, we're excited she has experience with accounting and things that we don't have a lot of on the council right now, so somebody taking a look at the books a little bit closer than we've been able to with a limited membership is going to be a very hopeful thing. And her work with the Arlington Historical Society, I think, will also help with the sort of work that we're hoping to do in the next couple of years.
Exactly. I think that is a great fit that, I know you did, is it the Arlington, was it a museum with the Arlington?
Yeah,
or-
the Arlington Historical Society operates a historic house museum and
Yeah.
then a modern interpretive museum space. So I've operated those for 5 years now. Time flies.
Really good.
So, yeah. And prior to that, a few other museums, so.
I just came from the historical commission meeting, which is happening right now.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure they'd love to meet you too.
Yeah, I've actually met a few of them. No.
She's ours.
She's, what's the word for that? No, I've met a few of them. I've done a little bit of work for them. Unfortunately, my meeting schedule with the Arlington Historical Society means that I couldn't attend their meetings, but I've done a little bit of house reviews and walking around and rating houses for historical integrity, kind of. So, yeah, I have met Lee Karras. This is
She's
one
awesome.
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great.
Anybody else? Okay. All those in favor of that appointment? So thank you.
Good luck.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank
Have
you very
fun
much.
and have
Really
fun.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you for
Thank you.
volunteering. Thank you. All right. Next up is the ADA transition plan. All right, I guess there's some questions about some of the language within the plan and some inconsistencies within the plan.
Yeah, if I can quickly, and I apologize that I didn't bring this to the attention of anybody over the weekend. It just wasn't a great time. But we had a discussion several weeks ago when this first came to us, when we expressed some issues with it. And I know that these rules and regulations are not quote-unquote etched in stone, but I am concerned when we put out a somewhat of a policy for this disability ask, and I want to make it clear, I certainly favor making our meetings, all of our meetings, accessible to everybody. But when you look at some of the specifics on here, I'm going to go on page 13, I guess it is, at the top. Under general considerations, it says it's regularly scheduled public meetings should be planned and publicized as early as possible, ideally at least 21 calendar days, but no less than 7 days in advance. as we expressed the last time we discussed this, it's difficult enough for us for volunteers like we just had in front of us to make a scheduled meeting for 7 days in advance, let alone 21 days. But that's not really the issue. It continues to say that if somebody wants to have accommodations, they are limited, based on the recommendation, to a 10-day notice to the committee that's holding the meeting. But if the committee doesn't have to set their meetings for until 7 days before, by this rule, the disabled individual is barred from asking for access to the meeting because they have to give their notice 10 days in advance. So it's just an inconsistency that's within the confines. The other thing I think we need to consider is the guidelines suggest that each committee has to have an assigned person that's responsible for making sure that the request is met. Again, we have difficult enough time with our volunteer committees having people step up to be a clerk, let alone to be a coordinator of handicapped accessibility and large print documents and having things written across the screen for people who might be deaf, American Sign Language person coming in or something like that. And then the other question is, if we're required to do this, who's paying for it? If you have to bring in an American Sign Language person or get some type of, so these are just questions that I don't know if they've been vetted, or if maybe it's just not as specific. If it's not required, why are we doing it? And if it is required, have we vetted it through enough to understand where things are going? And the other issues on page 16, if you look, there's a whole list of checklists for the meeting planners, the person who's responsible for having made sure that each meeting has met these requirements. And, number one, publicize the meeting. Has the public meeting been publicized at least 3 weeks in advance? I don't know if, other than the Board of Selectmen, many of the town committees we have a 3-week advance notice on their meetings. So we're already setting ourselves up to fail. Has the meeting been publicized on the Town of Maynard website? Here's another one. Has the meeting been publicized in the required foreign languages and ethnic newspapers for the relevant populations in the community where the meeting is to be held? I think that's a little bit out of whack for Maynard when we only have one public newspaper in town. Does the public meeting notice include accessibility? So it looks like this was a form that came out and we used it, but it might be meant for Boston, not for Maynard. So I think we might want to tweak it a little bit so that it fits our needs and bring it back when it's ready.
I have a concern about the budget allocation, section 11. Just that we've put in there that the town is spending about $700,000 a year on roadway improvements. That's fantastic, but I don't know as if that will continue. So I think that if we are, I don't necessarily know if that needs to be in a policy or if that just can be the town continuously improves, strives to improve their roadways within the Complete Streets program, et cetera, as they can, or whatever. I don't know if a dollar amount needs to be in there.
You're reading on page 15?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I have at this point.
Do you want some clarification on this?
Sure.
So the transition plan is not a formal policy of the town. It's a requirement of the state, and it is a formula. The format of the document came from the state, so that whole section at the back that Selectman Gavin referenced is indeed sort of boilerplate that we didn't edit in our process. But more importantly, in section 11, the budget allocation, it's not intended to say we will spend this much money. It's an indication to the state that we have a commitment to this transition to get further along the lines of full compliance. And here's evidence of it. We've been investing money in areas where we are weak, specifically our public roadways, which are not uniformly accessible. So it's a document to the state to say we're making steady progress towards compliance. Not that our policy is we will always do thus.
And
Okay,
that's good clarification. And are you done?
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, in association with that point, relative to the few things that I listed, do we have to comply with any of them?
So certain things are federal law. So for instance, if someone comes to us and says that they want a sign language interpreter for town meeting, we would be obligated to provide it, and we would foot the bill. That was another one of your questions. The costs are ours to bear. But we do not have to provide a sign language interpreter for town meeting if it is not requested. So we don't have to spend the money unnecessarily.
This refers to all public meetings. So the question would be if we got an active deaf person in town that wanted to, and I'm not disputing the fact that it's a good plan, I'm just wondering, are we committing ourselves to this, and are we obligated anyway? If we're obligated anyway, then there's nothing we can do about it and everything else, but
We're obligated anyway. This is documenting some of our practices and some of our intentions, but in that particular example, we are obligated anyway.
So as far as the checklist goes, though, like you said, there's kind of, you said it's kind of a boilerplate. Is there a way to customize it? Or I hesitate just saying yes, and then having it customized later, because I guess I need more clarification, and I realize that this was drafted back in either March or May, so I know that was before me, and I apologize that I need some help getting up to speed. But I guess so this is a transition plan. So this is our report to the state that this is what we're doing, and this is what we're.
That's right. So in 1993, the first and last time that we did this, our transition plan included things like getting our bathrooms accessible.
Mhm.
And it was much more focused on our facilities. 25 years went by, we did all or many of those improvements. Some of those buildings don't even exist anymore. But that transition plan is out of date. In addition to that, the ADA law has been modified by the federal government since then. So this is the state saying, hey, if you want to, be active in construction grants and so on,
Mhm.
you've got to show that you're complying with all of the different rules and regs we have out there. This is one of them. They want to have an up-to-date transition plan.
Mhm.
So this is acknowledging that we are not 100% compliant,
Right.
but that we have a plan to get there. I don't know what feedback we're going to get from the state on the checklist. It could be edited down, it could be structured so it's specific to Maynard facilities and Maynard meeting spaces. And they'll accept whatever we give them, obviously. They're not going to sit there and say, this particular item doesn't apply to Maynard. They're not going to know that. They're going to assume that what we told them is accurate for our community. If this board thinks that this checklist is overwrought, I'd be happy to scale it down and make it something that's much more specific to our needs and our abilities.
Well, I kind of think that if we're going on the assumption that the state isn't going to pay attention to it, I don't think that, I'm not comfortable with that kind of assumption that, okay, if, they're not going to look hard into whether or not we're doing what we say the checklist is. But honestly, has a public meeting been publicized at least 3 weeks in advance? I know that there have been Board of Selectmen meetings that haven't been publicized 3 weeks in advance. So we're already, I think kind of like what David was saying, we're already breaking our own rules. Yes, go ahead.
So that's not a hard and fast one. That's in a good faith effort to comply. We should give people as much advance notice as possible.
Right.
But I see the point, and there is a
Yeah.
discontinuity there with the number of days and so on.
So maybe offer a recommendation. So we are also forming a ADA committee.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Commission. And I think that could provide the proper subjective perspective to how we could apply this plan or transition plan or our general approach to accessibility as a town, particularly town government, and make it fit according to the community one. I think that would be the better approach as opposed to just asking you for your opinion, we could have it vetted, so to speak, by this commission. I don't believe we've appointed that commission yet.
Not yet.
So, when we do, I would recommend to them that this would be one of their first actions, because it is a good sort of, it would probably provide them a lot of their internal guidance as how to approach further projects, further developments, whatever the case is. And then they could present it to you as, with their endorsement. However, we are applying for a grant. That grant application is October 1st. And correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, but I think one of the requisites that the state would like to see is an updated ADA transition plan. So I apologize for the late notice of this.
So the state knows that we're doing this because they gave us a grant to do this. So now the next grant, which is the deadline's next month, right at the beginning of the month, is in part contingent on submitting this. That doesn't mean it can't be changed or
That
modified.
was just my point, they're gonna
Yeah,
be,
it's-
so we could change it after you
That's
appoint
what
the
I would
commission.
recommend,
Yeah.
but I honestly don't want you to have to do anything you don't feel comfortable with, but I would recommend that if you do, it would be with the understanding that it would be for the future revision by the ADA Commission.
One of the things the state recognizes, very similar to our open space and recreation plan, is that these things are always moving targets. Communities are always building new buildings or tearing down old ones or putting in new streets. So a document like this has to be dynamic. And so holding us to something, like I didn't put in here specifically, street intersections we plan to improve in the next 12 months. That level of specificity doesn't help. But the intention to improve street intersections is ingrained in the document. So it gives us what Greg just said, that flexibility and the ability to move forward at the same time.
What's the grant specifically that we're actually looking for?
It will give us money for the implementation of projects, and it could be for sidewalk improvements, it could be to pay for braille signage in our buildings, whatever we deem is the highest priority.
Yeah, so, fine, I mean, again, from my perspective, if we're, I never like being, we talked about this being, here, by the way, the deadline's tomorrow, that's never a good approach.
I agree.
But when we do give this to our yet-to-be-appointed ADA committee, I would think that the charge that they should be given is to develop a checklist that is indeed consistent with Maynard's expectations and desires, and not to put anything that's not legally binding on us. For example, on this checklist, almost as if it were required, it said, are at least 5 large print copies of meeting handouts available? So again, remember that that's every meeting that we've got, large print, so somebody's gonna have to be scaling out these things, and it's staff time, it's money. And then, it's just something to think about, so that we're not putting ourselves behind the 8 ball.
This is why we do these things in public meetings, to get this type of feedback. So thank you.
So is it possible for us to approve this with caveat?
With the understanding it will be adapted
Adapted, it's gonna be adapted.
upon,
It's up to you.
I don't think we can approve it that way. I think we can approve it with that understanding, but I don't think we can approve it that way as far as the motion reads. I don't think. I think the motion, which I haven't even read yet, is that we move to approve the ADA transition plan, and that's the motion in itself. I mean, as long as we have an understanding among ourselves that that's where we're gonna go. If it's approved, I don't see that there's a problem, but I don't wanna put that.
We can't change the motion?
Well, Chris, just maybe you could, so maybe you haven't officially read that motion, but Andrew just informed me that you may consider to approve it as a draft, and that would fit our requirements for.
Satisfy the
It's
requirement.
identical to the open space plan. We submit it, and then the
Good
state,
idea.
6 months or a year later, tells us we're good. And in the meantime, it's a draft, and we're eligible for grants and so on.
Which in itself would be titling it as we
Working on
do
it.
perceive it now,
yeah,
which
that's
is
a
a draft.
good idea.
It's a good idea.
So I'll make the motion, move to approve the draft ADA transition plan as presented. Is that,
Second?
okay? All right, so we've already had the discussion. All those in favor?
Is there a second?
Okay.
And there's one here apparently for Ron Calabria where it says if microphones are used during the public meeting, our adjustable microphone stands available for attendees.
I think it should say it should be available. Somebody who's 5'8" or
I don't even know why we let him in the building tonight with all these microphones. Don't touch him, Ron, just stand in front of him. Oh, that one was kind of low last night, so I understand the need, to wrestle it to the floor.
You pick it up.
Like Mick
I thought
Jagger.
you were doing a mic drop and leaving the building, but,
Well, it was the cord, I tried that, but.
Bad
it was the cord that
microphone.
was like-
all right. So we're on to the next agenda item, which is a water sewer billing abatement at 1 Florida Court, which is just a discussion for us to consider an appeal of a water sewer bill abatement for 1 Florida Court.
Thank you. Giving us 3 copies.
Thank you.
That mic record does not, it
You can have
records,
Ron
it
check
does
it.
not amplify.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll just
Hey, it
speak
works
from here.
both.
So as a means of introduction, my name is Eric Fonesbeck. I'm an acquisition officer at Anscombe Air Force Base and live at 1 Florida Court here in town. And just to give you some background on how this issue arose and how we became aware of it, at the beginning of 2018, I believe the water rates changed for the town. And we noticed an astronomical increase in our water bill for our building, which consists of 6 units. And so as we did a little bit more digging, we realized that for many years, the town of Maynard allowed multi-dwelling buildings to utilize a single water meter. And that was not really a problem at the time because the water rates were low, sewer rates were flat, and so there wasn't a significant difference between those units being built on multiple meters and those units being built on a single meter. But with the implementation of progressive water rates, the amount of the bill has increased substantially for our building. And as we have looked at other buildings around town and inquired about their water bills, that's also been the same. So I'd like to draw your attention to bullet number 2. Many of the complexes utilizing these single meters are lower income complexes, and they are located pretty much in the middle of town. Now, as I mentioned, this billing on a single meter was not cause for concern, but as these water rates became more progressive and the highest rate, I've also included a table at the bottom of the page for you to look at. As the progressive rates in the highest tier for water usage have increased, we've noticed that when a building has 6 units, the burden on that building per unit is significantly higher, and these graphs illustrate that. So the first graph on the left, if you'll notice, this is, we crunched the numbers for our building specifically. The additional cost from single meter billing per quarter went from about $125 to nearly $300. And the cost per 100 cubic foot also increased from about $1.25 to about $2. So that's a pretty substantial increase when you're talking about 12,000 cubic feet of usage for a building. So our suggestion and the resolution that we would propose is right now a complex with 6 to 10, maybe 20 units is being billed as a single domicile. So our suggestion is, and our recommendation is to divide either the total water usage by the number of units in the building and bill each unit individually, or you can also multiply the thresholds that are in the table here to the number of units, by the number of units that are in the building. And so that would equate to a more fair distribution of the bill, because right now some of the lowest income buildings in the town are paying the highest water rates per unit. So that's kind of the description that I'd like to bring and bring it up to the board of selectmen to make a ruling or to look for suggestions. So thank you.
In effect, I guess, my comment would be, in effect, you're asking us, and I'll ask the administration to tell me if I'm right on this, but you're asking us to basically have a rate hearing on this building separately from the rate hearing. So we set rates, and I understand where your issue comes from, that
Yep.
you have 6 units that are dividing up your water usage. But your proposal is based on the rates itself, which,
It's not based on the rates. So it's based on how, it's based on how those rates are applied to multiple unit buildings, if that makes sense. So all we're asking, the rates can stay the same, but what our proposal is to increase the threshold per unit. So right now, if you look at it, so for example, if you look at table, so for 2010, the rates, there's no base amount, there was no immediate charge, but if you look at the amount, so it went from for 0 to 500 cubic feet, the rate was $4.36 per 100 cubic feet. So that's, and then if you look over 2,500, it went to $6.88. But now that's shifted. And the point of these progressive rates is to encourage conservation, to make sure that the highest users are being hurt the most, pretty much, so that they reduce their water usage. For a building like ours that has 10,000 to 12,000 cubic feet of water usage every quarter, the majority of our bill, if you look at the table for 2018 July, the majority of our water usage is over 2,500 cubic feet. So we're paying the highest amount, $8.38 per 100 cubic feet. So it's not a question of the rates, it's how the rates are applied to individual buildings. Because if each of those units had an individual meter, then we would all be, we wouldn't even be in the highest tier of water bill.
does,
Why can't you just split it yourselves?
Yeah, why wouldn't you split meter it? That's what apartment
So-
complexes do.
Yeah, so I understand that, but we're being billed in the highest tier. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Right.
we do currently split it.
So,
But the fact that, yeah, the fact that the majority of our water usage is in the highest tier.
But with a split meter, you'd only be billed for your individual consumption at your
So
condo
is your
unit.
question, why don't we split the meters?
Why don't you add
Split the bill,
meters?
but you're already doing that, you're saying.
Yes, we're already splitting the bill. We would split the meters, but the
Yeah.
problem with that is, and that was what the Department of Public Works suggested.
Yeah.
For a building of 6 units, the lowest income individuals in the town, it's about $38,000 to
Now,
put these meters in.
Aaron, I just had a quick question, because I have, according to something, there was a fee of $225 per meter. Is that in addition, or is that?
So the $225 is the fee of the Department of Public Works for actually splitting the meters.
Okay,
I believe what's being stated is that was the price quoted for a plumber.
Yeah.
So
okay.
that's the actual physical cost.
so to put in
So the
6,
majority
so to
was-
put in 6 individual meters would
Yes.
cost about
About
200.
Almost $40,000, and that's because of the way the plumbing is structured in our building as well as other buildings in Post Office Square condominiums in that Florida Court area. So it's not the cost of the town to us, it's the cost of the labor in completely redesigning how the plumbings have been installed.
okay. So, I don't know if anybody's read all the history behind it. There's
Yeah, I've read
1, 2,
a
3,
fair
4,
amount.
5, 6. There's 7 or 8 documents behind it.
Yeah, I read it all.
But the condo association and or the landlord or the owner, at the time of the building is built or anything, they make the decision to do this. They have the choice to either make it individual or make it whole as one. And they decided to make it whole as one. We didn't make you do that.
But if I can,
So
sorry.
the fact that, you know, the water bill has increased really doesn't have much to do with the fact that there's 1 meter on the building. You know, the cost increases because the cost has increased. That somebody at some point decided that, you know, we're gonna go condo, but we are not gonna put in individual water meters. We're gonna do it this way. This policy has been in effect from that time to this time, so they made a conscious decision to do it this way. And every other business owner, whether it's the wealthiest individual in town or the most indigent person in town, has made that same decision. Somebody made a conscious decision to make one water meter and not break it out to 6, correct?
Yes, but can I
Okay.
respond to the point?
Yeah.
So at the time, the original builder, I don't know what his name was, who split these condos up, I believe it was in 2005 that he designed it. The town had a policy of approving a single meter for units, but over time, the policy now is that every domicile has to have an individual meter. So now the town's perspective, if that's correct.
Yeah, that's actually not correct. So, we have apartment buildings where we have, in town, there's one town meter, and then individually that building owner has decided to split meters. But that building received one bill from the town.
Okay, so that doesn't follow with discussions that we've had with DPW in the past. As how we were informed was that, multi-unit dwellings or multi-unit buildings are mandated to have individual meters. And you mentioned that it has a single town meter?
Correct.
And then they split up the bill privately.
Correct.
And that's also important to note that that's an apartment complex owner. I believe it's, I don't want to name names, but Jimmy McDonald who owns.
Yeah, I'm not going into details about individual accounts,
Yeah.
but there's that, and that's how we've looked at other complexes. That's how we're running like the 129 Park Street development that's coming online. They are charged a hookup fee per dwelling unit. So hookup fees are different than individual meter fees, right?
Mhm.
So when we're billing for a hookup fee, we look at individual dwelling units. So for example, 129 Park Street has 187 apartment units. We charge 187 hookups charges for water and sewer individually, and then they will receive in one master meter per building, and we'll be sending them one bill,
Okay.
essentially per town meter.
So that's a departure from what we were informed in our discussions with DPW in the past. So I think the key point is that the town approved the use of these meters, and at the time it was almost unconscionable that the sewer rates would then become progressive, and that the water rates would also become even more progressive and penalize the highest use. And it doesn't follow the spirit of the rates that have been implemented for a single domicile. So that's why we're here today. We're simply looking at an equal application. We're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. We would absolutely install multiple meters, one per unit if we could, but $40,000 for 6 units and for people that can't afford it seems unrealistic.
I understand your frustration. I mean, we do have high enterprise fees in this town. All 5 of us pay them in our own real estate, but I don't see the logic in that you're asking us, as David said, to give you a break, basically, on what the rate
Not us
is.
individually.
Well, it would set a precedent in this town, and I don't see how, as property owners, this burden should then revert and shift back to the town to absorb the cost.
It's not shifting back to the town to absorb the cost. So all we're looking at is an individual, it's not treating anyone particularly, anyone in particular in a special manner. If these water rates are divided, we're being treated just like a single family house that's on the other side of town that has a single meter. It's not treating anyone special. It's not shifting the burden to the town, because with that, if every individual meter or every individual domicile is charged the base amount, $20 for water and $50 for sewer, there's no special treatment, and we're all being treated, also being encouraged to conserve water at the same rate as other single-family homes. So there's no additional burden to the town. Essentially, the town, for the past few years, has been profiting off of, additional water usage by charging multiple units as a single unit and penalizing them for additional water
I
usage.
saw it, but I gotta
I
find
disagree
it.
with that.
The statement that you continue to make, that the town is profiting and you're being penalized, is inaccurate at best. And the fact that, in fact, this was a conscious decision made by the original folks who broke this into condos, this building. In fact, the people who broke this into condos over the course of time have been delinquent on almost every water and sewer bill that they've received, okay? And you had a guy that was, whether he wasn't putting the money where it was supposed to go or everything else, that doesn't have anything to do with the town profiting or penalizing anybody. The people that built this building and then turned it into condos, the people that set it up as condos, made a conscious decision to do it one way or another. They chose apparently the wrong way. That's not the town's fault, nor is the town penalizing anybody or making anybody unduly responsible for any bills. The town is simply following the water and sewer rates as they appear in the water and sewer rate chart and regulations. That's what we're doing. We're not unduly penalizing anybody. We're not unduly profiting or anything else. So those statements to me are false, number one.
And this
Number
is
two,
just to-
don't interrupt me because I didn't interrupt you when you were telling your story. Okay, and number two, the fact that you now come to us and continue to say that we've done something wrong.
I'm not
okay?
saying the town has done something
You
wrong.
are suggesting that the town has done something wrong because you're suggesting that we're unduly profiting and that we're penalizing somebody. Both of those statements would suggest that the water and sewer commissioners, the five of us, and/or the DPW director, okay, have done something to penalize you, which they have not.
So there's a difference between omission and commission, and this policy may have been made, not in ignorance, for lack of a better term, in ignorance of the fact that it would penalize buildings that use a
Yes.
single meter.
Or you could look at it from the way that it was done and the way it took place was that in order to save a few bucks, when the rates were low, we could just all be on one meter and share the cost. And now when the cost goes up, let's tell the town it's their responsibility. It's not our responsibility. It was responsibility of the people who made the conscious decision, whenever it was made, to stay on one meter. Okay?
It was a departure from, based on the information that we had, that the town, the Department of Public Works only allowed, meters to be installed per dwelling. It seemed like a departure to us at the time from what the town viewed as proper and correct for having an individual meter installed in every dwelling. And this is a new development and we haven't been informed of this policy change. And so this is why we came, and this is surprising and a little bit disappointing.
What's a new development?
The new development that the town continues to allow single meters for multi-unit dwellings. We've had a number of conversations with the Department of Public Works, and in every conversation that we've had with them, he said, the policy now is that an individual meter is installed per unit. We don't allow apartment buildings or condo complexes to use a single meter and then split the bill. It just doesn't work. And so we've had on multiple occasions discussions, and that is,
Bring a point.
you can disagree, but it's the facts.
So the top amount is 2,500 or more. That is reasonable for a single family that they might use up to that much. But any multiple dwelling is going to use more than that on a quarterly basis. And so to say that this new billing system is intended for large complexes, to me that underwrites the fact that you're going to be penalized, in our opinion, because 2,500 is the max threshold, which is nowhere near what any multi-family dwelling will use.
Could you introduce yourself, by the way?
Excuse me?
For the purposes of the meeting minutes, can you
I'm
introduce
just
yourself?
Yes, Ariane Fonsbeck.
Thank you.
So, no disrespect with my question here.
Yes, sir.
I assume the One Florida Court has a condo association of some type.
We do, yes.
Are you like the president, or are you the?
I am a representative of the HOA. The president is Lily Schwalm Rosenwald.
Okay.
And she's not available to come tonight, so I'm the representative for the
Okay.
HOA.
Okay.
I think you received a letter from DPW with the recommendations of what you should go ahead and do. And from my standpoint, I think that's really that's what I agree to. I think it's a great recommendation. You should install separate meters, and that's how I think it's the responsibility of the HOA or the owners, whoever the owners are. Obviously, they're combined. It's a condo, so that means you guys, you have to have the responsibility. You got to split the bill and install those meters, so then you don't have this issue going forward.
Okay. That's the standing of the board.
I mean, I don't know, do you guys disagree with that?
I agree with that as well. I mean, I think as homeowners, that's the responsibility you take by purchasing property. There's ups and downs, and luckily you're part of a condo association, so you don't have to bear the full burden of the cost as a single family person might want to do if there was a similar situation.
Those wouldn't be an issue if it were a single family home.
But there's other issues. Stuff comes up when you're a property owner. It's just part of it,
I mean, it's gonna be initial cost to you, but I think in the future, you're not gonna have this headache, so you're gonna be able to, you know, charge the way every unit owner is gonna get charged.
So I guess the issue would be whether or not, we'd have to vote, because this is a request for an abatement. We would have to vote to either accept the abatement or reject the abatement, correct?
Do we have, which number of those documents is the
The actual abatement,
actual
request
request
for
for us?
abatement, yeah. I think
It's
it's
Abatement appeal?
Yeah,
it's the,
you didn't request.
It's the
It's,
top
uh,
one.
The top one, I think, is the appeal, no.
no,
No,
it's
it's
the
the
last one.
request is the fourth, if you see the fourth one,
So
here, the
many
request.
open.
Request, fourth one
The one that
down.
says request.
Is that the request of the appeal?
That's the
Is that
abatement
the original
request.
request?
That's the abatement request.
All right, the question,
The one that looks handwritten,
yes.
It is handwritten.
Very, very neat handwriting.
Which was
So-
the only form that was provided to us.
So,
it looks good, actually.
Sir,
is this, but my question is this the original appeal to the DPW, or is this an appeal to us?
I think that was the appeal to the DPW.
So,
Is that a separate appeal, though, or does it just come
Do
to?
we
Wouldn't the
use separate
abatement
appeals?
request be
Do
the
we-
same?
The same, yeah.
It's the same one.
So, yeah, it was,
Yes.
so it was original abatement request to the Department of Public Works. I denied it, and they requested to push it forward to the board.
Right.
I think there's two abatements. One for outstanding interest on the account, and the second for the, I guess the rate structure, if you want to call it that, that is being presented tonight.
So, we've heard the issue on the bill itself. Can you just discuss a little bit the issue that Aaron just raised about your abatement request on the interest? How did that all come to be? Just
So this has kind of evolved over time, as I mentioned. So at the beginning, when we first came, we did notice that we were unaware when we purchased the property because of the single meter that was billed to a single apartment. So that was not part of the package when we purchased the home. We found out a year and a half after we moved in that we had an outstanding debt on the water bill of about $2,000. And so we came, and in our initial conversation with the Department of Public Works, it was intimated to us that perhaps the interest would be waived.
So a previous owner hadn't paid, is that?
So I don't think you have the documentation, but there was the former treasurer who was responsible for paying the bills for the association was delinquent and didn't pay them and didn't inform anyone in the association that that was the case. And so no one knew until they inherited it, and the reason that he gave when he passed over the responsibility to pay was, oh, you know, the town didn't bill us in the past, which is not correct. It was because he was delinquent in paying the bill. So this request comes from our initial discussion with the Department of Public Works when it was intimated to us that he may be able to waive the interest. And so we operated on that assumption. Later on, we received word that would not be happening. And so we appealed it, and this kind of evolved to a discussion of how things are billed, not specifically for it. And we've begun to pay down the amount. I think we've...
Total outstanding at this point is about $1,000, and
In interest alone?
$1,000 in the total
Combined.
debt. The
the
interest,
principal is about $500.
yeah.
And since we've lived there, the water bill has always been paid in full.
Yeah.
I guess my question to you, though, is when you close on property, normally with all due respect, you do your due diligence and you see if there's any, tax liens, water bills, other utility bills, and make sure that they're zeroed out before you purchase it. It's all public information. So considering you moved in after the fact, did it not come up at all in your closing or anyone
It
else?
didn't come up in the closing because it's built to Unit 6. Yeah.
The water is charged on a single meter, it goes to a single apartment who pays the bill. So it's affiliated with that apartment and
Makes
did not
sense.
come up as we were working.
It
through
wasn't
the paperwork.
included in the file.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So,
And, okay, and so therefore the town wouldn't even recognize that there was a sale going on at that particular site.
Oh,
because-
at that meter, I think the
that
town
meter,
understood that there was
yeah.
a sale
I get
happening
it.
because of the,
Yeah.
so.
And what's that amount? Do we know? What,
It looks like it's,
It's down to about $1,000.
What was the
$1,000 is the
initial
is the principal. What's the interest?
So the total amount with the principal was 2,100. We've paid it down now, it's about 1,000.
I believe the interest amounted to about $700 when we started
Yeah,
out.
your appeal says that the principal amount is $497.53.
Okay,
So there's about $503 in interest,
yeah, so,
which I have less of a problem waiving, knowing that it wasn't you guys who incurred it. I don't know
yeah,
how the
and
rest of
I
the
don't think
board.
anyone was, so
Yeah.
the principal, what was the date on the document? Just to have it, because I hadn't.
it's in the 28th, the May 2nd.
I said, so I think at the time when we filed that,
Where's that?
the principal, if it was 497, you
Mhm.
mentioned? So I think the remainder on there, we can go back and look at our water bills, but it was about $2,100 in total.
Okay.
So it was probably about $1,600 in interest at the time, if that's what was listed.
And you've paid a portion of that at this point?
Yes, we paid it.
Almost half of it?
Yeah, paid the total, including, interest to about half of what it was.
Aaron, do you happen to know the number by chance?
Yeah, I got a couple comments, I don't know if you want.
Just so the record.
Yep, so just going back a little bit of history on this from DPW standpoint. So we were originally made aware of a situation by the appellants back in April of 2018. There was a situation, I met with the couple a couple of different times and discussed the situation. They brought up two concerns, one of a previous account treasurer who was delinquent on some of the accounts, and then also the issue of the increasing cost on the water and sewer bills as a result of the rate increase in 2018. So looking back, the original comment that was made about possibly waiving interest, that's one option that could come up, depending on the situation, right? But looking back and fact checking and looking at their account history, past bills, past account ownership, decided that wasn't going to be an option, it wasn't feasible, and that's kind of, in summary, some of the information I provided to you in the bullets. As far as the interest goes, the way that account water and sewer billing works is when we receive a payment from a customer, the first part of that payment goes directly towards unpaid interest, so that's what's paid off first, the town is made whole, and then the balance of the payment is then applied to any outstanding principal that remains. And then, so if you don't make your payment, it just kind of in whole every time, every quarter, and pay off all of the interest and any outstanding balance and current principal due, it just kind of snowballs and it'll show up as an interest, but it's new interest charges. It's not the same balance of $400 of interest that was still there in 2015. And then just looking back we pulled the file on this account, and we keep track of whenever a request is made by an owner to change who the bills go to. So back in 2005, looks like we received a notification from Joseph Rossi, who looks like it was a closing attorney on the Post Office Square condominiums, assigning a Mark Marullo as the person that would be receiving the bills and correspondence moving forward. And then in 2014, we received a notice from Derek Vandergift requesting that Mark Marullo, who was then on the bill, it be changed over to him as a resident of 1 Florida Court Unit 3, so the Derek Vandergift became the representative who was receiving the bills. In the appeal that we received, it stated that Mark Marullo was the individual who was delinquent on the bills, but hasn't actually been receiving the bills since 2014. So that would mean that it's been 8 years since that problem was occurring.
Can I interject just to give some additional info on that too? And that was when Mark Marullo informed Derek Vandergrift that the town had been delinquent in billing, and this amount had built up. But we looked through line by line, and that's not accurate. Go ahead.
So looking back at that was part of the reason for denying that original appealant, because it was, a situation that they're claiming it occurred and hasn't occurred since, it would appear to be rectified by whoever next took over account. Their basis for delinquent payments was based upon a person who was responsible on the account back 4 years ago. And then as far as the rate structure, we looked at what the usage was, and they did have a big a jump in usage since the last bill, from 2017 into 2018, they went up about 2,000 cubic feet. And so obviously that plus the change in the rate structure is going to account for a significant jump in a bill. You know, and as we state in kind of our policy in conversations that were had, the recommendation was to split the meter, and that, you know, one thing that we could do, you know, we typically charge one split meter fee per split meter. You know, in a situation where you're splitting 6 meters, that's a pretty hefty bill, and that could be, you know, we could have make some flexibility if they were, you know, looking to make that conscious decision to do that when it's such a high a bill for a plumber. But, you know, they opposed to do that. You know, the way that we look at it, you know, the statement that was made earlier about that, you know, 1 meter per building is not acceptable anymore. That's actually, it's on the contrary. It's easier for us managing all the 4,100 bills that we have to have less town meters per building. So we'd like to see one and then a property owner responsible. You see larger condo associations such as Deer Path, Apple Ridge, Oak Ridge. Every individual condo has their own meter. That individual condo owner is responsible for that count and pays in that count. If bills are delinquent, interest accrues, and that one condo owner is then responsible. If a person fails to pay their bill for over a year, we put a lien on the property, we notify it, and then we end up collecting our money through a tax lien. And that's kind of the process. You know,
It's a little easier, and I'm not arguing one way or the other, I'm just sort of thinking this through. It's a little easier to have individual meters on townhouses, though, than on apartment.
Agreed. You know, and that's kind of one of those things when you have an apartment building. There are a lot of apartment buildings in town. You know, when you have an apartment building, somebody owns that building, and that person's then responsible. How they split their bill and send it to their tenants is not the town's business. It's between them and their tenants. Lots of apartments you see, they include like hot water, so you know, it's free to the tenant. But where you have an apartment building that gets changed over to a condo, you know, that's something that, you know, that's a conscious decision on whoever is developing that property and splitting it out into a condo to make that change. And it's also the, you know, responsibility of a homeowner to do their due diligence. And obviously, if it's their first time going through the, you know, purchasing a house, there's a lot of different things that are going on. And if your closing attorney doesn't tell you that's something you need to look for, and that's why you're paying that attorney to you know, be the subject matter expert and check for that stuff. And it's unfortunate. We do see situations like this that occur, whether it's water sewer billing or some other situation where people just aren't aware because they haven't been through it before. And we try to help people out as much as we can, but, you know, there's certain things that they're just kind of tie our hands.
Do you traditionally, Aaron, get requests with regularity from units like this when somebody's closing on a condo, that they check in to make sure all the bills are paid?
Yeah, so typically it's we get it from the broker.
Yeah.
The broker will call us 3 days before closing, 2 days before closing. Occasionally, like the panic day before closing, hey, we need a final water read. We'll send the truck out, we'll do the read, we'll come back, we'll get the bill, prepare the bill. The broker comes down, or usually the broker, not the closing attorney, but the broker will come down, pay off the bill, and then, you know, they stamp it, they bring it to closing, then the attorney checks everything at their closings. So that's the typical process.
And
a lot of the brokers in town are, you know, it's a lot of the same brokers, so they know us, they know them, and they say, hey, you know, quick phone call and we can take care of it.
my other thought, and this is just me thinking, is I imagine that the treasurer of a condo association has a fiduciary responsibility towards the condo association, and therefore a legal responsibility towards the condo association, and could probably be held legally liable for his or her failure to act in a fiduciary manner. So therefore, it seems to me there's probably a legal aspect that can go in.
Completely agree.
But if they live in the same building, I understand that there's...
No, so he's since moved, and he's since declared bankruptcy, and so none of these claims will have any bearing.
I do have one
There's always
suggestion.
adversary proceedings, though. If they're that egregious and he committed fraud and he had a fiduciary duty, you can proceed and pursue people in bankruptcy court and put a claim in as a creditor.
Yeah, so we have an attorney that's working on that, but it's, for the 3 years that we've lived here, nothing has come, you know, from that. So
Yeah, I do have one suggestion. You know, depending on what the board decides this evening, and it's up to obviously the property owners. But, you know, my department hasn't gone into the basement. We haven't looked at the plumbing, and, you know, that's one thing that, you know, we do help residents when tough situations kind of brainstorm and come up with ideas. I mean, I'd be willing to offer, you know, one of my technicians or even myself, we can go look at the plumbing in the basement to try to come up with some solutions, maybe lower cost solutions for splitting meters. My guys have been in the, you know, in basements all over town. We've seen all different kinds of situations, and we can offer suggestions. So, I don't know what plumbers provided the $40,000 estimates, but maybe we can come up with the town, and I can just offer some manpower and some ideas to help. But
Do you have recommendations on the abatement after
Yeah,
hearing
I was
everything
gonna
tonight?
ask you for that.
So yeah, in my bullet points, so obviously I denied the abatement, and that was kind of on my standing that, it's a responsibility of a homeowner to pay their bill in full, and, we recommended splitting the meter in this type of situation.
So I guess it's
I
up to
stick
us.
with that, but,
And do we know the total amount again? I mean, we don't,
there wasn't, so typically when we receive an abatement, it's because somebody had like a water heater let go, or the leaking toilet, or some type of a plumbing issue, and they didn't know about it, and until they get their bill, or didn't realize how much water they actually used, and then they'll abate. I had a water heater let go, and I lost X number of gallons of water, and we do some type of a calculation and look, and we still charge them the sewer or the water, but we'll abate the sewer since the sewer didn't go down the drain, but I had, in this type of situation where it's not really, you can't put a dollar value on. I haven't seen that. I briefly glanced at the handout that was passed out, but the abatement was a special rate. I don't know how we abate that, or abate the interest. We pay off interest, like I said. Anytime you make a payment, you pay off past interest. So that interest is relates, that's currently on the account, if there's any. It's associated with the most recent billing quarter, and not something that was created by somebody who was managing the account back in 2014.
Yeah, I feel bad about the situation, I really do, especially the interest issue. But my concern is the precedent that it sets. Should we waive interest like this in a situation where, a treasurer of a association has failed to comply with their responsibilities? Because then there's no incentive for those people in the future to, if I screw it up, no big deal, because the town will abate it, and the people come in and they say, you did it to the last guy. So that's the concern I have, and that's where I really, I'd love to be able to say I fully support abating it, but that's my concern. So, but I'm willing to listen to what the others say.
To abate the interest is one thing. And if to abate the interest is, the reason that you're abating the interest is because of someone else's poor management or whatever is certainly one thing, but that still leaves the same problem going into the next meter cycle, that there's 6 unhappy people based on the fact that they're all on one meter. So to
But
abate
there's two different abatements that we've got in front of us.
so to abate the interest, I understand why that would appeal to some or make sense to some or seem fair to some, but when you start to talk about the overall, the abatement of the total number of dollars and the changing the way the meter's read and setting a new water rate and all that, like you alluded to earlier, David, I don't see that, but I certainly wouldn't object to offering some assistance with the interest.
I'm with you on that too.
Because the point is made, and no one's disputed the point that the bill has been paid in full
Consistently.
in the time that they've been there, but they're just catching up on the old debt, and that's, so to waive the interest, I wouldn't necessarily object, but to, the rest of it is, there's not really, the town's hands are tied in this sense, because we'd be setting a precedent that, more than a few people would suddenly be here looking for similar abatements and similar changes and looking to take advantage of that precedent. And it's not a precedent I'm willing to set based on the fact that, there's a lot of people that are doing their own thing and building their own buildings and with full knowledge that this is how it should be done versus another way, and they don't really care because they're just passing the cost on. Now they're going to come back and they're going to want to change it, and the precedents have been set, but Are they gonna pass the savings on to the people that you claim are the lowest in town? I doubt it, but
Yeah, so.
that's a whole different issue.
That would be for, we're arguing simply for condominiums, not for
Yeah.
apartment complex, but I can see where that would.
Yes.
I agree with that point, Chris. I really am nowhere near close to being favorable on the meter issue, the billing issue, but the interest issue, my concern is just the precedent that it sets, but I'm willing to, you know, if everybody else agrees that that's something we want to do, I'm fine with it.
Yes, Aaron?
So on that note too, just on that abatement request form, it states abatement request must be made in 60 days of the date of the bill. It says a few other things, that payment must be made in full prior to abating, but the bill that was attached with the abatement request shows an interest of $70.82. Does not show the $400. So I think they're referring to rolling interest that's accrued throughout the years, right? But and like I said, we pay off interest, the town gets made whole first before we pay any previous bill. So at the time the abatement request was made, it was $70.82. I don't know what it looks like today, because I'm assuming they've made a payment, and this bill was dated April 1st, so I'm sure there's been more payments since this abatement request was made, and the interest is then now paid off.
So that $70 would have been paid off, and then,
There's probably an outstanding you know, there may be some interest due. I believe that I included in the bullets to you in that packet that there was an outstanding balance of $1,200 or something.
$1290.46.
Yep.
So if I can respond to that as well, from the analysis that we did of the Excel spreadsheet and the water bill history back in 2010, that interest amount, from what we've understood, is the interest for that period. And it follows, you know, on the 14%, I believe it was 14%?
It's
interest
14%,
rate?
yeah.
Yep.
So, as far as I know, in the following, you know, if that bill is not paid, then that interest gets rolled into the principal in the following bill.
Right, it compounds.
It compounds.
Yeah.
So I believe the interest amount is more than $70, but that's just for that quarter, interest incurred in that quarter.
I agree with the prior comments. I don't have any issue with abating the interest, given the complexity of the situation.
Which interest number?
Is it the $70 or the 400?
The $400. I think that's fair. I mean, you can't help that it's compounding. Well, you did file this back in May too, so it's not like you've been ignoring the issue. It just takes a while to get in front of us.
Okay.
But to Aaron's point, the last,
Yeah, but the point
Oh,
is
it's
that
'cause he's
each
going back
bill
accruing.
has been $70, $70, so the actual accrued interest over time was 70 times whatever many months, I assume. That's how we got there.
Is it feasible to come back with, you know, working with the DPW and come up with an actual accrued interest? Because we've begun paying in addition to what our water bill is, so we can burn down the debt. Is it possible to go back and look at what the total accrued interest was when the complaint was first filed? Is that feasible? And come back to a later board, or at least submit it to the board?
Yep.
I would think
Yep.
so.
Okay.
I would, and I
Yeah,
would,
before we
you
make a
know,
decision, we probably need an actual number.
Yeah, so we have, yeah.
let's do it that way, and I'd like to hear what Aaron, you know, and the department have to say after somebody goes down and takes a separate look and sees if there is a way to install some meters at less than a $38,000 cost to the people in the building.
Mhm.
You know, much more reasonable cost.
Just so I understand, as you're heading down the post office on your right, as you're heading down that road, where is the building?
is it across
So
the?
it's directly behind the post office in one Florida court, so the
Okay.
parking lot and the rail.
Yep.
and the-
Okay, right along the rail trail?
Yep, it's right
Yeah.
there next to it. So.
The reason the cost is so high is because there's two cold water lines, one that feeds the right side of the building, one that feeds the left. So to meter it, you essentially have to replumb the whole gig.
Hmm.
Let us know what happens and then what the interest numbers are.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so,
Yes.
so my only I guess, comments would be that if we're looking at past interest, at what point does the board want me to go back, how far in history? And because honestly, we don't know at what, when you go back to the last delinquent bill, I mean, that could be 10 years worth of interest, and I.
Go ahead.
I would go back to the date they started to pay the water bill in full.
Okay.
So at some point, somebody started to pay the water bill in full every water billing cycle.
It's a good start.
And so if you go back to the, so if the last billing cycle was paid in full, that's fine, then the next one back, so just go backwards to determine which ones have been paid in full, and then when you come to the first one that wasn't paid in full, we'll start from there.
It's been paid in full since Derek Vandergrift, which he mentioned, he has a record, since Derek Vandergrift took over the payments.
And
It's
then-
been paid in full.
And we have a spreadsheet that's kind of a maze to look at, but we do have a spreadsheet that has, the exact, we went through the water bill and transferred it from what the town provided to us and looked at what the principal was and the interest accrued, and kind of, we have a calculation on that, and we can.
We'll probably have to do our own.
Yeah,
Just,
I mean,
just
we
for-
can
just for-
provide.
just for the sake of, the town, just figure it out. All right.
We'll
See you
continue it
again.
until we
Yep,
get
we'll
that.
just continue the
Yeah.
discussion until we get that stuff back.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Sorry for the extra work, Aaron.
Sorry.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Are you leaving?
I can stay.
No, I'd like you to stay for 2 minutes, because I'm gonna just jump into the chairman's report to the end, because I have 2 questions that you need to help answer. So you'll do them right now, before we get to the next agenda item. You can sit down. You can stand, you can sit, but I didn't want you leaving, and then maybe we can do them, because I had them written on my notes for this week. It's just an update on the Green Meadow, the Green Meadow mold and the bleachers at the high school. Just quick and dirty on both of those, so we know where we're at, because they're both hot button topics in town.
Absolutely, and I'll actually be attending the school committee meeting on Thursday night to provide an update to them as well. So for the first one, the Green Meadow mold situation, so last week, the school department administration was made aware of an individual concern, without going into too many details, of a possible mold concern. So immediately, the superintendent sent out a notification, I believe, to family, to staff, and eventually to the community, about the concern that they had received, and some of the actions that the town would take to respond to address the issue if there was an issue. So we called in the Department of Public Health on last Wednesday. They did an inspection of the building. They didn't find any visible signs of mold in the building. They did find a stained ceiling tile that wasn't wet or anything. It was in a back closet in an IT room that's since been removed. But other than that, no visible signs of mold anywhere in the building, and they do not believe there's a public health issue. They suggested that it's an individual health issue, and spoke with the individual who had the concern, as well as their union staff members and school administration. They will provide a full report to the town within 2 to 4 weeks, and that report will be posted on the Department of Public Health website. Some past history, the Department of Public Health did come to the building in 2011 and earlier, and then 2 previous inspections in the early 2000s of that building. At that time, at no time was there ever found to be a public health issue in the building as related to mold. Since then, the school department took further action, and we contracted with a environmental specialist company to come in, and they did air quality testing, which the Department of Public Health actually didn't recommend. They don't recommend it for a couple of reasons. One, there's no standard for mold. There's no safe level of environmental exposure for mold. They just measure it in the atmosphere. There's mold in the air outside. There's mold in the air inside. But we did want to take, because there was that concern from that individual in the building, we took the extra step to do that air quality testing. And we will be sharing those results as soon as we receive them. I did speak with the firm today and got some preliminary. There was no findings of any toxic mold or any mold spores that cause any type of health issues on a widespread basis or anything like that. But there will be a more detailed report that will be shared with the public as soon as that's kind of sent into school administration and shared with them. So we don't believe that there's a public health issue or any type of health issue as relates to mold in Green Meadow School. The school administration has taken some further actions, though. I think they've ordered some new carpets. We'll continue to address any roof leaks as they come up. We don't see any active roof leaks with the rain that we've had this week. There have been roof leaks in the past. It's an old building with a large flat roof, and that's not uncommon in school buildings or other commercial buildings. So we address those as they come up. And that's kind of on that. I don't know if there's any specific
The only
comments.
thing that I have a question is this: how did they jump to the conclusion that it was mold without even really going through the testing process?
So without going into any, I guess, how do I word this?
This is like allowing people.
It's a
for
person,
no-
so there was, the school department was notified by an employee that they might have they had an individual health concern. I don't think I can go into any more details without violating any type of HIPAA laws or anything like that, so, but it was an individual concern, and the school department responded.
Okay.
I don't know if you have any more questions on that one. Okay.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, you don't think the school, because I think there's been a little bit of criticism perhaps on the part of the action that the school committee took, or that the school superintendent took. Can you clarify for the public record that the schools acted appropriately?
I believe they did, and I think actually they went above and beyond. They responded immediately. I was on vacation when the concern first came up, and I opened my email and I got back and I had like 20 emails back and forth between school committee, administration, with communications, prepping communications. They involved the town administrator in the communication. He was involved, from the get-go. And there was a lot of communication. I think there was a lot of unofficial communication amongst employees and individuals in the building, right? Rumors kind of get going, and it kind of gets, misinformation is spread rapidly. So the school department was very proactive and sent out a very good communication to the general public to, address the concern. I think there's other schools in Massachusetts that have had some mold issues, coming out of the hot, humid summer. So I think they wanted to be proactive and make sure that they were sharing as much information as needed. We took appropriate steps for a public building. The Department of Public Health has an indoor air quality program and an indoor air quality inspector to service our needs as a public entity. And so that was the first person we brought in, 3 business days after we heard that there was a concern. That inspector was in the building doing an inspection, and briefed the employee and the staff and the union that was involved in the situation. And we sent out a communication immediately afterwards. And then we took an additional step, which, like I said, it was, the Department of Public Health didn't feel was necessary, and by doing the additional air quality testing too. So I think the school department did a great job. And,
I think it's important for the residents to
Yeah.
hear that.
Absolutely.
I think it's one of those situations, anytime you hear like certain keywords like mold or, another
Asbestos.
contaminant, asbestos, right, lead, something like that, it's literally like, panic words. And so,
Thanks.
yeah. The next question was the bleachers. So the town was made aware of a safety concern of the bleachers, an incident that had occurred a week and a half ago. And the town reached out to legal counsel, our insurance company, and met collectively and decided to close access to the bleachers, take them out of service until we could address that safety concern. So we're actively working with our insurance company, local building commissioner, town administration, school administration on determining appropriate next steps. Town's top concern is the safety of its residents, and also mitigating any type of risk for the town. So we've met the bleachers were inspected by the town's insurance representative. A risk manager came out and inspected those on Friday, provided some recommendations. And then we inspected those again yesterday internally with staff, and we'll be looking to take action on some of those recommendations, some further inspections from a third party, and until the time that those are deemed to be the issues that were brought up or were addressed, we're going to keep them out of service.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Easy to get that information when you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the school department provided some temporary bleachers over there, and then depending on, how long I believe the athletic department or school department sent out notification to the different athletic groups to bring chairs. If they need to sit, there's some seating that's been provided but it's limited, until we, determine what how long, those will be out of service.
Okay. Is that, anybody else, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, 495 Metro West Partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Matthews. I'm the Executive Director of the 495 Metro West Partnership. Some of you might recall that I come in periodically to report on our activity, share some resources, get your input, and I'd be remiss if I did not thank the town employees. We work very closely with the town staff. I particularly want to thank Bill Nemser for being on our board of directors. So he's one of my 76 bosses, so I'd be remiss if I didn't call that out.
Only 76?
Yes. It's a very large board. Thankfully, it only meets quarterly. Otherwise, I'd spend my entire life preparing for board meetings, as I'm sure the staff can probably empathize with. We do work very closely with Andrew and with Greg, so I was happy to have the opportunity to come in and just give you an update on what we're doing on behalf of Maynard and the other 34 communities we serve in 495 Metro West. For those of you who do not know, we're a nonprofit, so we're not a governmental agency. We were founded back in 2003, intended to be a public-private nonprofit that helps the communities in the region advocate for needed infrastructure and policies, given the fact this region can frequently be overlooked. I know it's hard to believe from all of you as municipal officials that suburban communities like Maynard would be overlooked, but it was a concern in 2003. It's still a concern today, so thankfully I'm still gainfully employed. The partnership itself, in addition to being governed by a public-private structure, we have a number of committees with public-private co-chairs, so that governance structure is echoed through our work on transportation, our work on economic development, and our work on water resources. I'd also be remiss if I did not note we work very closely with Representative Kate Hogan on a number of fronts, as well as the broader legislative delegation, Senator Eldridge and others, but particularly on a state commission that was formed 2 years ago through our work with the delegation that Kevin Sweet was on when he was the administrator here. The 495 Metro West Suburban Edge Communities Commission. We worked with Kate and the delegation to create the commission, recognizing that frequently the state's development policies and attention can be dominated by gateway cities. It's appropriate to have a conversation about gateway city needs, but we feel it's just as appropriate and just as balanced to have a conversation about the needs of communities like Maynard, not just large urban centers. So it was and has been a very successful effort, working with a legislative delegation, working with municipal officials, and working with state agencies to lead this development discussion. So I know I shared some materials online, and Andrew carefully instructed me that I can use the mouse. Let's see if I can actually manage to use the mouse. Doesn't seem to be moving. Is there an on switch? Seems to be on.
Which file do you want to open?
I don't know if I should open all of them or.
There you go, it's moving.
Oh, the annual report's probably a good place to start. Thank you, Andrew. Yes. I did bring hard copies of this in case it's necessary. I do know the staff were very kind. Becky was very thorough, I think, with your packages. But the annual report is intended to report back on what we're doing. So a lot of this is linked to not only supporting towns like Maynard. I need to point out Maynard's leadership in the shuttle service is a model we are holding up statewide as a successful model of municipal leadership filling a very important gap, getting people to and from commuter rail. We're using it as a model pointing to the fact that the state needs to support municipal leadership of this nature. And frankly, the ridership and the efficiency of the overall service is a huge credit to Maynard and the entire region. And I think all of you in the town are to be commended for your leadership in filling that vacuum. It's somewhat sad that there is such a vacuum, getting people to and from commuter rail, and the fact that it's in all of our interest. But the town's really at the forefront of that conversation. So I want to thank all of you for that, and for the town's participation in Crosstown Connect, the Transportation Management Association. We've been working very closely with Maynard and the other communities on that effort, and again, we hold that up as a state model. A lot of the resources that we try to share with you in the package are intended to provide help to the town as you apply for grants and submissions and engaged in business development. So it's everything from, we do annual reports talking about the payroll we have in this region, which is currently the 2018 report has it at $24.6 billion in this region. And frankly, and I'm not just saying this because I'm in Maynard, we frequently hold up Mill and Main as an example of the transformative nature of what's going on in this region. I mean, you look at the history in Maynard in particular in that site, and it's indicative of the importance of this region to the state economy back from the Civil War straight on through. And when you start talking about DEC and the history and the way that spread out across the entire region for the computer revolution, and then you talk about what happened with Monster.com and the .com boom, and now you look at the mix of tenants that are there and the shift to amenities, which frankly the high-tech employers we work with, that's one of the first things they ask about. In some cases, we're able to provide leadership when the state is looking to work with companies from outside Massachusetts, looking at location decisions. We hold up our region as a potential site for those companies. And one of the first things they ask is about the amenities for their employees. And what's happened in town over those amenities, I mean, frankly, mostly thanks to Bill and Andrew and the town staff. I'm a huge fan of Korean food, thanks to Little Busan in town. And you know, if you look at where that's available, it's available in 2 places in the entire region, here, and there is a Korean restaurant in Westboro. And I live in Worcester, and I've tried to take my kids to a comparable restaurant, and there isn't one. So if you look at the building blocks that the town has been putting in place here, it's helping not only development in the town, but in the region as a whole. And I really want to thank the town for your leadership. The resources we try to develop are intended to help you, while we also talk about your needs on the state level. So the commission, the Suburban Edge Communities Commission, allowed us to represent your needs on transit, on shuttles, on water resources, and on issues like dealing with a very large mill redevelopment. I realize that's presented significant challenges to the town over the years. I also think it's a big opportunity that the town has taken advantage of. Other towns with sizable mills are still struggling to get to the point of success you're at. So I'm happy to entertain questions. I intended for this to be more of a conversation, not me just reading a bunch of handouts, frankly. So I'm happy to take questions. I'll do my best to answer them. I try not to overpromise. I don't know if I can answer every question, but I'll do my very best.
My question would be, what are your thoughts? One of the big things that we talk about here, and especially with Representative Hogan, is regional transportation.
Yes.
And what is your vision for, say, 20 years out, and the opportunities for regional transportation that would allow citizens of Maynard to get to Hudson, to get to Marlborough, to get to, other areas other than to the train station, which is great because people that use it love that system, and the seniors are loving the aspect that they get too. But what is your vision? What do you think? Do you think there's a realistic opportunity there?
I do, and I've been very fortunate to be in this position since I joined the partnership in 2004. I became the executive director in 2005. So to me, I'm now in an interesting position where I feel like now I'm gaining some stature in terms of looking backwards. And I'm fond of reminding people where this region was when I started. There was no Crosstown Connect. There was no shuttle to the train station. I think we absolutely do need to focus on the future, but I do like to focus on how far we've come in a relatively short time. And we've come a long way, and like Crosstown Connect, we work with other transportation management associations in our region. Traditionally, those have been driven by private sector companies, no pun intended, but typically the private sector companies are the ones founding it and really driving it. In this case, it's a real credit to the communities involved that municipal government really saw the need, created it, and the private sector is involved, but the impetus to this really did come from municipal government. What I'm seeing is these are all positive steps towards where we need to get. So for instance, I was fortunate enough to be appointed. The state just started engaging about 6 months ago in a 2-year commuter rail vision study. So the state is recognizing that they have a commuter rail operator contract that's coming due down the road in a few years. They're taking the time to discuss what is our vision for commuter rail. They appointed me to the advisory group. We had our second meeting last week. And in that meeting, my first question to them is, if you start talking about the commuter rail system, you start talking about stations, like, whether or not we're going to set up hubs or, rotating services or how the scheduling is adopted, you need to talk not just about commuter rail, you need to talk about first and last mile. And that's something that not only myself, but 2 other members of the advisory committee really made quite clear to them. You can't do it in a vacuum. And the T, we all recognize the MBTA is not going to be able to build enough parking to accommodate everyone driving to a station and parking there. They simply don't have the money, if nothing else. So what's going to need to happen is going to have to be this recognition. I do feel one of the things I did when I first took over was help found the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. So I went from community to community and pointed out that communities could use their assessment to the MBTA to divert some funds to start a regional transit authority. We've seen tremendous growth in that RTA, but also in others serving other communities throughout our region. What we're doing now is advocating for more funding to the RTA, so it's not simply coming from municipal assessments. I think while there's an understandable focus by the Commonwealth on the MBTA, there is, particularly in the last state budget, a corresponding focus on, in recognition that they need to do more to help the regional transit authorities. As they do, I think you're going to see more opportunities develop for this first and last mile in filling other gaps, to your point. We frequently tell people in Boston, the communities we work with are not looking to pick one route just to go to one community. And particularly when you start having jurisdictional boundaries with regional transit authorities, right? You have residents in Maynard that want to go north, that want to go south, that want to go east, that want to go west. I mean, particularly where you sit between 128 and 495. And there have to be more solutions to that. Now, the state is very aggressively looking at congestion as part of its greenhouse gas emissions planned reductions. And there's been ongoing senior level attention to that at the state level, that they need to do more about transportation. So I'm hopeful that recognizing that will be an opportunity to drive some of this resource conversation beyond, frankly, the frequent media and political focus on bus and subway in Boston. And I know Representative Hogan and I, frankly, had lunch in Maynard yesterday, and her top focus is transportation. And it's not just hers. A lot of the other state legislators in this region, in this caucus, are some of the most outspoken voices for transportation in the legislature. So we're very fortunate to have them as partners.
Thank you.
So aside from transportation, which is mostly focus for everybody, what is the partnership's number one, concern going forward? Like, what's their number one topic or project or that type of thing as you move forward, other than the obvious, which is transportation?
Well, from an overarching standpoint, Mr. Chairman, we're focused on making sure that suburban development needs are being addressed suitably. So transportation is part of that. Another aspect of that is economic development. Secretary Ash, the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, has been very personally attentive to that. He came from Chelsea, where he was the city administrator. However, he has been in Maynard multiple times. I think you've all seen him multiple times. I can tell you that as many times as you see him publicly, there's 10 more opportunities he's having of discussing with me privately opportunities in the region and communities like Maynard. He has been tremendously attentive. I do feel very gratified that when the Baker-Polito administration developed their economic development plan, I was on that advisory committee, and there was a clear urban emphasis on that. They talked about we need to have an urban policy strategy, and we need to have a rural policy strategy. My point, which the secretary recognized and put in the plan, is there needs to be a suburban strategy as well. So we're focused on not just transportation, but on the development aspect and how those policies play out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions?
Thank you for everything you do though for our
Absolutely,
area.
thank you. Some
No, thank you. I honestly, and I'm not saying this just because I'm before your body, but I mean, we do hold up Maynard as a model within the region and outside the region, and a lot of the pieces that have been put into place in this community are being emulated elsewhere. And I do want to thank the community. I want to thank the time the town staff spends with us, particularly Bill for being on our board, but the entire town staff are always available and always accessible. And we very much appreciate any opportunity to come to Maynard, particularly for the dining opportunities, but also for the opportunity to, every time I'm here, it seems like there's more happening. So congratulations to all of you, and thank you for the support you give us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Number 9 is Power Mill Place, the LIP process. I don't know if anybody has any comments, questions about last night, or anybody wants to speak about it, or we want to discuss it.
I think it went fairly well. I think that there were a lot of residents that had concerns, and I think that, we stayed until every single one of them was heard, so I think that that's important.
I agree. I think a lot came out of it. I guess we all got an email as well. I don't know who's seen it or who hasn't later in the day, and it seems to be a lot of confusion over if we, what we might do, or
we don't do the friendly, what happens?
Did you get an email?
Yeah.
if we agree to, if we agree to negotiate, or we agree to, accept the LIP and that type of thing. We're not agreeing on any of the terms of anything. We're just agreeing to enter into the LIP discussion. We're agreeing to enter into, we would be agreeing to enter into the quote-unquote friendly process.
Right.
So I don't know if anybody's, was willing to entertain the idea of voting to go that route and start down that road, or if
I
anybody.
mean, before we vote on that,
Yeah.
isn't it something that I think we should discuss about what is it that we gonna authorize for whoever's gonna be representing, to negotiate? What are we negotiating?
Well,
So-
I don't, as I said last night, I don't know that, that 5 people don't sit here and have Joel sit right there to start. At
That's
the
not a
beginning.
bad idea.
At the very beginning, he hasn't come in and addressed the 5 of us alone. He hasn't come in and addressed, responded to any questions from any of us individually, in regards to either the LIP itself or the MOA. I think that's a good place to start. I think the MOA, although it wasn't as much of a focus last night as it has been in this room a couple times, I think that, there's certainly some questions to be asked, and, I think it's appropriate that we have him come in, maybe even before we vote whether to reject or accept it, to have Joel come in and respond to any questions, based on our own questions or questions that might have,
Came from last night.
come from last
basically,
night. So we'll get him in here for our next meeting, and then, have that discussion. I think that's a discussion we need to have. I mean, we've seen him a couple of times. Personally, I was unimpressed with what he had to say last night. I thought he could have done a much better job. I thought that a lot of people were kind of yearning for some sort of presentation in terms of, better visuals, graphics, something to look at. I don't think, he didn't offer anything to look at but him sitting in a chair reading from his notes. I didn't think that was very, I didn't think that was very useful as far as I'm concerned, but that's just me. But I would like to have him come in, address the concerns of the five of us, because I know we all have some on the especially the MOA piece, and then, then make our decision based on those type of discussions or that type of discussion, because I don't think based on anything that I've seen today or anything that we've seen today, at least it's my own opinion, and everyone else can, chime in, that we have any type of information that will allow us to make a decision at this point, either way. So
I think having him in to talk with us is fine. I don't think that that's necessarily announcing to him or to them that we are entering into formal negotiations. I think it's an opportunity to have as you said, a one-on-one conversation. I also think, the point was made by, I think it was Jim Fulton last evening. I also think we should have an understanding if this is going to go forward. As you all know, I do not believe we should go forward with one project between two towns. I think we should talk about Maynard only. It says Maynard up there, and I think we should talk about Maynard, not about Acton, or have any conversation with a project in Acton. But if he wants to go forward and they want to go forward with a dual project between Acton and Maynard, I think it's important that they show us exactly what they're offering Acton, and we know what they're offering Acton, and that we understand that we're not then negotiating our own deal, and they're negotiating some other deal, and then we come to find out once again that we didn't do as well as we could have. We should know exactly what.
I think that we'll do as good as we can in the negotiation. And I think that, unfortunately, I think my thing, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think the thing that came out of last night, and I have to be honest, part of what came out last night that really, really stuck out was a distrust between Maynard and Acton for some reason. And I understand that there is history, and I'm not naive to that by any means. But I also think that we need to do what is best for our town, regardless of what someone else is gonna get. We can't always feel like we've got the raw end of the deal if we're doing the best we can with what we have. If we go forward and we decide to at least negotiate, then we're gonna negotiate and we're gonna try as hard as we can to protect our town. And that, in that way, yes, it is two separate agreements, because Acton's gonna do the exact same thing, as they should. So it just comes down to the fact that we have to be super attentive to our side of that deal, if we decide to do that.
But Justine, to David's point, I think we're trying to figure out who we're negotiating with. Are we negotiating with the developer? Are we negotiating with Acton? Are we negotiating with both? I mean, we're not clear on who we're negotiating with.
To the kind of in the middle of the point both you guys are making, I honestly am. I was actually, and I asked the question last night for clarification from Ellen, and I have it written down at home. I forgot my giant notebook, but I was a little put off by the fact that there's a group that actually represents the town of Acton in a public meeting, telling people.
Public hearing. Public hearing.
Well, no, it was a public meeting.
To contact Maynard about your sewer problem. That to me is, no way. And I honestly, I've considered, and I've thought about it a few different times today, and I haven't really talked to any of it, but I would consider, addressing the chair of that board in writing and saying, who are you to suggest to anybody that Maynard is offering water or sewer or any other, town asset to anybody? In your meeting, you're gonna have an Acton meeting, and you're gonna say, go to Maynard and get sewer? Where does that come from? Does it come from this project? Does it come from the fact that it's, across the street from the guy? But it's certainly not their place to suggest to anybody that they come to us for utilities. And that's my opinion, but I was a little put off by that. But I do think in you know, we need to know who we are and what we are. And I really, to be honest, I don't care what they're gonna do with Acton. I'm really concerned about, to David's point, the sign on the wall behind us, the name on the wall behind us. We have to do what we have to do for this town, and I don't really care what Acton does. They can do whatever they wanna do, and as far as several different things that, David has alluded to in the past, there's been instances where they have done just that and not had really any concern for what's happening in this town. So I don't think we really need to be overly concerned with what they're doing. At least that's my opinion, but I don't care what they're doing. Would I be a little put off if we were to find out at some point in the process that, we ended up with X number of dollars in mitigation and theirs was significantly higher? Maybe, but they're also putting in, triple the units in that town as opposed to what they're putting in here, so maybe there is gonna be a difference. So I don't know if it's apples to apples or any of that stuff, but I think all those things need to be, looked at. But I don't know that we wanna get into, negotiating anything for Acton. We need to negotiate for ourselves.
I agree with you, but I think the bottom line is that we need to negotiate. Whether or not we decide to go forward or not, we can make that decision later, but I think we need to at least enter and start those conversations based on the feedback we've received from people in the town last night, the emails we get, the department heads, and have that conversation open with Joel and bring him to a meeting.
Well, I agree, but I agree that, that there would be, my opinion is it would be, my inclination right now would be to accept the LIP and start the process at some point, but before I get to the point where I'm willing to make that statement and raise my hand to do so, I want to have Joel sitting in that chair right there and ask him, where are some of the things that in the MOA came from that, that he drew, and he repeatedly talked about Leah last night, that, that's his whack at it. That's got nothing to do with us. So the language that the one gentleman was referring to about,
Yeah, that
They're
if they
flaws.
don't, yeah.
if this doesn't if one thing doesn't happen, nothing falls behind it type of stuff. Those type of exclusionary clauses in the MOA, which I've read as well. What attorney in their right mind thinks that was going to stay in there?
Well, I think, well, that's my point, though. I don't think we need to accept the LIP at this point, but wouldn't that just be entering?
Yeah.
Isn't it just, we can enter in negotiations without addressing the LIP
As far as
yet?
procedures, you don't accept you endorse it. So it's up to the ZBA to do the
Yeah.
ultimate approval.
But
You
we
would be
wouldn't do that
endorsing
until-
it based on the conditions of the memorandum of agreement. So what you would do is negotiate for those conditions to
Prior-
attach to the
When does the endorsement come, though? Pre-negotiations or post?
post.
Okay,
You
so-
don't endorse
Right.
until
Unless-
you say,
So we can
we
walk,
know
endorse
exactly.
based on these conditions.
so we can negotiate and still walk away is my point.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I think we should do, is just start,
Either party can walk away at any time.
okay, so that's
That's
my
true
point,
as
is
well.
just, we should just
Not
start
once
this
it's endorsed.
conversation.
No
What's that?
Not once it's endorsed, you can't walk away.
No.
Right, at that point, there is understanding that the process is moving forward.
And I, the 10,000-pound gorilla that needs to be discussed is selling sewer to Acton. That needs to be discussed, and I'm going to repeat it, it needs to be discussed town-wide, not just by the five of us.
I think that's ridiculous, David, though. Like, we have a democracy and we're elected officials and we have the information and we're doing our due diligence. And I think if you bring this to a town meeting, as you keep advocating for, you're setting a very dangerous precedent, which is one of your favorite things to bring up at meetings. And this could happen in further developments on individual cases and on larger scales. That's why we're an elected board. It's our job to question, to do our due diligence and make a decision. We're the Water and Sewer Commission and we're the Board of Selectmen. And if people don't like how we vote, then they don't need to vote us back in. And I feel really strongly about that. It's gonna cost the town a lot of money to have a special town meeting.
I think the amount of money to have a special town meeting is a hell of a lot less than what we could be costing us in sewer
So what
over
would-
the next 50 years.
So I just have to say that, to be honest, and I've said this before in a lot of other meetings, that this has taken up most of my free time. And I am constantly talking to Aaron, Bill Nemser, people from Stantec, independent people who I know that are town engineers, that are assessors. I am going through this project with a fine-tooth comb. I think that people who are going to vote on this, and I'm not saying I don't trust the voters, because I do trust the voters, but I think that there's a lot of chance that a lot of these voters are going to vote with their heart. And as much as I would like to, I need to vote on the facts, and I need to take what's best for Maynard. And I will be 100% honest, at this moment, I don't know what that is. But I think that if you take it to a town vote, and if people vote it down because they really feel passionately for that reason, but they haven't looked into what that could mean down the line, then that ties our hands, and it doesn't allow us to even begin to negotiate, because if you take sewer out of the picture, we have nothing. We have nothing to negotiate. They can put in 74 units, and we would have to sewer it with nothing.
We would not have, we could certainly have to sewer, and I have no problem, actually, if they want to discuss about a Maynard-only project. I have no problem in offering sewer and
Why would
water.
that be better? That's my question. Why would 74 units without any
Because it's
mitigation?
Maynard residents, and I care about Maynard, not Acton.
To that,
I do too.
But to
I
that
care
point-
very deeply about Maynard residents, and that is why.
Then
I think
20
an
years from
additional
now, 20 years from now,
I think an additional $300,000 to the enterprise fund every single year that could go into any part of sewer improvements is something that we need to consider. I'm not saying I'm gonna do it, but I'm saying it's irresponsible not to even consider it. So that's where I'm
But
at.
Justine, we don't even know if that $300,000 is gonna be enough for what we're gonna need down the road. That's the question. The question is.
I understand that. So then you have a
Is
study
it
done.
possible for us to, if we're gonna think about selling sewer, that, to me, $300,000 is peanuts.
No, but that's the cost that we get every single year.
But also,
Yeah.
that's what negotiations are for too.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
we're not there yet.
Right.
But also, what happens if the town votes no to the sewer thing? They do an unfriendly route, and the state then forces us to provide sewer, because that could happen. Our council has weighed in on that. There's no precedent, and it's quite possible based on certain things that exist in our bylaws.
I disagree that our council has suggested.
So I've got one more hypothetical, because we're throwing them all out there, and then I'll wrap it up. So say we say no, the town, and the developer walks away, because I understand. Then what happens when a developer comes in for the 40B project for Stratus? And we have to, as Maynard residents, and I understand, but we have to fully sewer and water this project without any mitigation, because it's just something that they can do by right. At least with this, we get mitigations. At least with this, we repair some of the pipes. At least with this, we get the out-of-town sewer rates. If we have somebody else who comes in and builds in Stratus, then we just have to accept it.
You do understand that this gives us safe harbor. If this were to be approved, we would not have safe harbor forever. We would have safe harbor for 2 years. So 2 years from now, we still have not met our 40B requirements, presumably, and somebody can still come in 2 years from now and take Stratus, or even a better, a more damaging situation is somebody could come in with a great development that benefits Maynard for the Stratus property, and guess what? We gave away our sewer capacity.
We're not giving
because-
it away.
Wait a minute, yes, we
We're
are.
selling it.
To whom?
We are selling
To
it
whom?
to the residents who are living in the
We're selling it to the town of
development.
Acton.
Okay,
Right.
so, all right, let's just do a little bit more math and then I'll stop. I promise.
Well, I think they get the,
Okay, I won't. But what I'm just saying is, I understand the implications of this case. I understand the implications of the development. What I'm saying is, personally, I feel it's irresponsible not to at least explore all the options. And if people decide to take away the possibility of even providing sewer, then you have tied the hands, and then we just do what we can to just catch up. Which again is the equivalent of Maynard getting the raw end of the deal.
And costing us millions of dollars.
So that's just my.
How does it cost us money?
That's my opinion.
Because we have no leverage for the mitigation damages, like, you seem.
there is no mitigation.
There is, yeah,
There
they're
is no
gone, it's off the
there is no
table.
mitigation. There is no mitigation if they go the other route,
If
but that's
they
okay.
go an unfriendly route?
So you're okay having it on your shoulders, costing the town millions of dollars in our revenue crisis? You know, you're advocating for a fire station that's gonna cost $12 to $15 million. We don't have the funds.
Has
to-
nothing to do with the fire
does.
station. No, it doesn't.
You wanna
The
spend-
sewer has nothing to do with the fire station.
This
But
whole,
it's money.
Zero.
No, that's
Zero.
what
Please do not mix those two issues. It's zero to do.
It has
If we
a-
want to
yeah,
talk,
but
if we
see,
want to
we
talk
don't-
about
we
the
don't
budget,
work in
if
a
we want to talk about the
microcosm.
budget, and to talk about how we're going to formulate our budget in order to meet the requirements that we set that we would
Well, you
do
can
at
keep
town
operating
meeting,
in a
let's
vacuum,
talk
but
about the
that's not
budget.
how it
But we're
works.
talking about sewer.
It's
We're not
all-
talking about the
Well,
budget.
I think the conversation is relevant to the mitigation dollars, not necessarily the sewer dollars, but they're all, they're town dollars. The mitigation dollars are, I think, what we're talking about, as opposed to, it's true that the sewer dollars don't have an effect, and they're not,
They would stay in the
the
sewer.
fire department's success or failure is not gonna be based on what the sewer department does, but the mitigation dollars may have an effect on one or the other. That's, I think, the point. I would assume that that's the point, because no one suggested that the fire station is gonna be built on sewage dollars, but
I just heard that this project is going to help us build a fire station.
any additional revenue has a potential to go towards a fire station, whether it's this project, or as you say, another project that's Maynard only, or anything else. Anything that's new in town has the potential to alleviate the financial burden of the new fire station that we are hoping to build, correct? Any potential development,
Absolutely
whether you like
true.
it or not,
Absolutely true.
whether the other side of the fence acting made 10 cents and you hate that, that's okay, but
But I think that,
any potential project in the town of Maynard that's gonna have a positive impact on our cash flow and our tax base has the potential to impact a positive way the new fire station we're hoping to build in the near future.
The only thing is, I'm concerned, we don't want to sell ourselves short. So if you want to enter into a negotiation, we need to be armed with the right information in order for us to go to them and say, you know what? If this is what we're gonna do, we gotta make sure that we're asking for the right price if we're gonna do it that way. Which in a way, I'm on the fence, because I don't think that we should be selling our sewer to someone else. But at the same time, if we are gonna sell it, then let's sell it the highest dollar we can in order for us to be able to mitigate for the future of our town, whatever is gonna cost us to repair.
we need to know
That's a very
what
good
the
point.
value of buying into our sewer system is.
Right.
And,
You know-
Right.
and right now, sewer hookup fees ain't it.
No, it's not it. It's
That
not
was
it.
my
But
point too, that the
you also
hookup
have to
fees is not
under-
enough.
You also have to understand when you start to talk about these things, and we'll all get to it because it's in the reports that we've all seen and we've all had, and in other reports, what is the proposed capacity of our sewer system based on? What's included in it today? Is the mill included as is, or is the mill included as it was 4 years ago before they took a couple buildings out?
Right.
And is there capacity built into that prior study that considers the possibility that there are, to Ellen Duggan's point, 500 units potentially to be built on that site because they have permitting for it, or they have zoning for it? Does it include Stratus? Does it include 129 Parker and the potential for units there to impact the system? What's included in that number? That has everybody all up in arms, and, certain people are making certain claims that they have no right to make because they're not based in fact.
Just
They're
be
based
careful.
in their own hysteria and their own dislike for the project. Certain people are saying certain things, whether it's in public meetings or whether it's on social media, that these certain conditions exist that don't exist in our town today. It's a decision that's gonna be made by whomever. I in particular, agree with Melissa in the sense that the five of us were elected to make these decisions. That's my personal opinion. But when you start to talk about these things, we're gonna have a certain set of information that's gonna tell us before we even get to that point, if we get to that point. It's all ifs right now, exactly what the capacity is, what went into what went into building the capacity, what all that information is. And the only place that information is likely to come about is in this room.
It's important to understand and remember that when we talk capacity, we're not talking the capacity of the physical building itself to generate and flow and
Yeah.
run. It's our capacity to discharge into the river.
Yep.
Right.
That's the capacity that's important to us.
Right.
And right now, we are not at 50% capacity, as has been suggested.
We're at 74%.
That's correct. And when you add in additional flow that is not yet touched upon, and in the reports that we've gotten includes other projects that have not yet been touched upon, that 74% suddenly goes up quite a bit.
Actually, 74% I think is total.
That 74% goes up. You cannot dispute that. And guess what? When somebody wants to develop Stratus that would benefit Maynard, we're going to have to tell them, we don't have the capacity. Not because our wastewater treatment plant doesn't have the capacity, but because we cannot discharge more water into the river. And the legislature, or the DEP, is currently evaluating the discharge permits that are allowed along the Aspet River. Those numbers are not going to go up. Those numbers are going to go down. So we are setting ourselves up to block Maynard from economic development because we favored a project that supported a huge development in Acton. So I'm all for, as I've said 100 times, for a project in Maynard that's Maynard-centric. I care about Maynard and Maynard's residents. I don't care about providing sewer to a neighboring community. That's the bottom line.
So the question I have, just real quick.
And I think
this
last
is
night's
another-
meeting suggested, I didn't hear one resident say that they suggested that they favored, out of 100 people. When was the last time you had any Maynard meeting with 100 people in it other than a town meeting, and not one person stood up and said, let's sell our sewer to another community?
So the first part is we already do, but we do
We do in one-off situations, and let me explain the, I think it's only fair to say, the reason that those happened is because the end of the sewer line, they didn't want to have a dead end, so they ran the sewer line around a loop, and the loop came around, and the homes, if you look at the homes that are attached
Oh, I see
to,
them.
they're all houses that you can't even get to without going through Maynard to get into
So
stuff.
the second part of
So
it
it's
is-
not that we already do. We
we
do
do.
because there was a plan. And when was the last time the Board of Selectmen approved an out-of-town sewer hookup? Not in the last 11 years.
Okay, so
Because
the
we've been
next question
smart
I have
about
for
where
it-
our sewer is going.
I will end with one more quick little math thing that I have not, in fairness,
It's gonna make me hit my hammer again.
I have not, in fairness, talked to Aaron to confirm this, but this is my own little, my own little numbers here. So if 2% of, what they've said is that the 254 units are going to take up 2% of our capacity, the capacity. 3%, oh, see, I was told 2. Okay, well, I have to do that again, hold on.
Well,
So, basically, hold on. So the question is, oh, go ahead, why don't you finish and I'll.
No, I'm just
finish
gonna say,
mine.
we also are, there is a precedent, we also do sell some sewer use to an already existing building that is in Acton as well.
Yeah, that was done without a vote of any organization at all. It was done on a
So
glad hand.
So I'm back with my numbers, and my numbers are,
Typing at
so.
night?
No,
So if we have if 254 units is gonna take up 3%, then doing that math, we're going to have 26% left. Multiplying 3% times 254, I think that's what I did. Basically, what I came up with is that we would need to build 2,200 homes or residences or apartments to be at capacity. Now, I realize that I have not double-checked these numbers with Aaron, but from what I can tell, that's what we're talking. We're talking about 3% of our capacity, which I realize is more than that we've ever done. I realize it's more than we've prepared. But when you look at the fact that there's still 26% left, and if 254 units takes 3%, then we've got about 2,000 more units.
Justine, what's the
before we can
value of our total sewer system, our total sewer system?
$125 million. Between
Okay,
$125
what's
million
whatever the number is, if it's $125 million, what's 3% of $125 million?
Say it again.
4 million.
Okay, $4 million. I haven't heard any offer for $4 million
We
coming.
haven't negotiated.
I'm not, I haven't heard any offer of $4 million. And as a matter of fact, when a number that I suggested, 5 months ago was commented upon, it was laughed at. And I was told I was crazy. And I was told to basically shut up.
Well, we can't really,
And then everybody was happy because they told us we we're gonna get $2 million.
I don't think
I
anybody
think 2
said,
million's a
"Shut
good
up."
it's
starting
a starting point,
to have a
right?
negotiation.
Because that's what a negotiation is
And
a
you don't start at $2 million.
Why wouldn't they? They're
think
gonna
we just-
start as low as they can, and we're
No,
gonna
no,
go
no,
as
no,
high as
no.
we can.
I think, well, I'm not gonna get
Isn't that
into
what a
that.
negotiation
I
is?
think that there was,
Okay.
forget it, not gonna go
I
there.
think you need to stop insinuating this stuff happened behind closed doors. And
No,
that's
there's,
just a number.
I think, no.
That's what you just, that's,
We're good.
Can I make a comment, Chairman?
Nope. There are no comments tonight. You missed the public comment session. Thank God.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
can save it till the next meeting and make the public comments. There really isn't anything to say on it. I mean, what's to be said?
I just want to say this is the first time I've seen a real discussion, and you should be doing this before you talk to Joe.
Yeah, we're gonna have them come and sit right there.
Now, before you do that, you folks have to get together. Whatever that is, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
Appreciate
And I don't see why there needs to be a smart remark.
A what?
But I'm okay.
A what?
But I'm okay. Smart remark.
What?
What you just said to me.
What did I just say to you?
No, you can't talk, and I don't know why you want to talk, and you could talk next time. You
Yeah,
know,
but this
just say
isn't,
no.
it's not a,
Just say no.
next time it will be no.
Good.
Okay?
Good thing we're having a democracy.
It is a democracy.
Yeah, right.
It's clearly a democracy, and the issue is that, not in every, in most towns, there is no conversation over there. It all takes place here, most towns, as far as I know. But anyway, I'm not gonna get into that. It's, obviously, have I ever not allowed you to speak? Have I ever not allowed you to speak? No, I did allow him to speak. I actually did allow him to speak. Do you think he was gonna leave? Do you honestly think, Ron, that you were gonna leave the room without me allowing you to speak? And all the time if you come here, when I've been the chairman or on this board at all, have you ever been denied the right to speak or the opportunity to speak? No, you have not, in any instance. So obviously, that's a in-cheek remark, and obviously, you were gonna be allowed to say whatever you needed to say.
All I wanted to say is, we started to get into something that is really negative. So I wanted to kind of say, let's not do that. And I think that I haven't seen you five have this great discussion, even though you're disagreeing, on this topic before. And I think it's really important, and I compliment you. And I would like to see you take a couple of meetings or whatever and try to beat this down to agree or disagree on some things before you talk to Joel, because otherwise you might be talking to Joel as five people. And I think, as you said, you need, I think this, even though there's some disagreeing, this is a good discussion. I don't want to see it go back to, with all due respect, David, going back to what happened 6 months ago. That ain't gonna help us, So, but you guys had a really good discussion, and that's all I wanted to say. I would encourage you, keep beating each other up, keep talking about this stuff, because you got some facts out, and you had a little closure. And I think if you get closure, then when you talk to Joel, you'll get the right answer. Whether people agree with you or not is irrelevant at that point. That's all I wanted to say, Chris.
I know. And you've never been disallowed the opportunity to speak. And clearly, you weren't going to get out of the room tonight without making your point, because, number one, you weren't going to let it happen, and I wasn't going to let it happen.
That's
So
right.
we both understand that. I've never not allowed you to speak.
Yeah, I'm
For,
old
for,
times,
for a variety of reasons, and that's, you
But-
have the
but
same,
Chris, to
you have
hit-
the same level of respect as I give to Mr. Tommel in terms of allowing you to speak at anytime you want to, because of the things you've done. So obviously, I wasn't gonna not let you speak.
Thank
There
you.
are certain people who wouldn't be allowed to speak, but you're not one of them.
And I'm a little tired tonight, so I apologize.
It's okay.
To his
We'll
point.
We'll hug it out in the parking lot before we go home.
Chris, to Ron's point, I think he's making an excellent observation. Is that I think that it's difficult for us to have discussions because it's always about this. We can't have a discussion with email. We can't get together, the five of us. So this is the only forum we have for us to have that discussion, for us to have this share of opinions. And I think before we go sitting in front of Joel or sit in front of wherever we're going to sit to negotiate, we need to understand what we're negotiating. And I don't think I'm clear on it. I'm not clear on what we're negotiating. What are we using as the parameters for us to sit down and talk to the developer or to Acton? I don't know.
I think, and David will, I mean, he might agree. I think there are no parameters. I think there really aren't. It's a blank slate. He provided he provided his version of a blank slate, which is not really too
Right.
blank.
Okay.
Right? So from that point, there are no we set the parameters.
Okay.
You know, if we want a, you know, to, one of the people's points last night, if we want a gateway sign at the town of Maynard, which is currently today is on their property, I think they own that that small piece of land where that stands, that's something that goes into the MOA. You will put, you know, you will make, you know, that type of thing. So any single item that, anybody in this room or this board has in mind is open for discussion. No matter how trivial or how, you know, how overwhelming it is. I think I don't know, do we make, you know, and just throwing it out there, do we make the sewer issue the first issue we discuss, or do we make it the last? I personally, you know, I don't know where it's gonna go. And if, you know, there's discussion that people were gonna, there's a petition where people are gonna call for to have it placed on a town meeting, and when is the next town meeting? We don't even have any ideas if we're gonna have a special town meeting. So there's those type of conversations. Do we continue discussions like this before we have Joel? Maybe.
Well-
But do we see where other things are going as well?
With all due respect, if there is a petition, and it's submitted, the charter says that a submitted petition shall result in a town meeting within 21 to 45 days of the date that it's submitted. So if there is a
It
submission,
would be a non-binding vote too, given the issue. That's the other thing.
that's a legal issue, I don't know the answer to that, but there shall be a town meeting vote
Yeah.
within 21 to 45 days of the date of submission.
So can
That's okay.
I want to.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, because you had said, who knows when the next town meeting vote is?
I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying, we don't have one scheduled, and typically when we've had them, they've been part of a previously scheduled town meeting.
That's correct.
So I'm not arguing I'm not arguing the point, I'm just saying in the past, typically the way we've done them is we've scheduled a town meeting and then they've arrived. We haven't, at least in my time here, I haven't seen anything where one's come that has forced a town meeting.
Yeah.
So,
I think it would be a waste, just my perspective, even if this petition went forward and we have to spend the cost of having a special town meeting, if it's a non-binding vote anyways, I think it's a little silly to go forward with that.
Well, that's not, but if we get a petition, we don't have a choice.
Yeah. No
I just
choice.
think the people circulating the petition should know that and think about that as part of their decision, considering how tight we are.
As far as having Joel here for the next time, or voting, or deciding to do whatever we're gonna do, I'm actually thinking that our town administrator is going away for 2
yes,
weeks.
right.
So I'm thinking that.
For a happy
that those
occasion at
types-
that.
Those types of conversations, probably, it would
We'll
probably be
wait.
beneficial for him to be back in the room for.
Is it only
you
2
know.
weeks?
All right. So when do you,
Please don't make me commit to that.
what did she say?
She asked me, will it only
Or
be
2
2
weeks.
weeks?
It's not that far, we can go find them.
We could actually
bag over
walk
your
the-
head.
we could walk the-
So-
So I don't, from my end, actually.
what does everybody want to do? I mean, do we want to wait?
I think we have more
I
discussions
think
like
so.
this as
I
we
think
move
so.
on.
Yeah.
I
rather
think
than-
we have more discussions, and I think our next meeting we should come prepared, all of us, I think each one of us prepared to what exactly, where we stand individually and how we feel about this project, and then start talking about it with each other and come to some kind of a conclusion to where we are. Because I think we're divided right now, and I think everybody has their own opinions. And, I too have been sitting with people and talking to people, and I have to look always for what's good for Maynard. That's always the way it's going to be.
Absolutely.
But I just think that we need to keep having these discussions. I know it may not be exciting, but we need to continue having these discussions.
So for our next meeting, which is October 5th, I believe, correct?
A third, I think it is.
Third.
I think it is the third.
Second.
Second.
The
Do I-
third,
do I hear
so-
fourth?
so yes, this is.
So nobody here knows when our next meeting is. I can tell you,
No, it's this.
it's on the end of my, it doesn't even,
It says right here.
next meeting, 10/2. So
Okay.
anyway, so for 10/2, I would suggest, just because it might be just easy to take a break from the elephant in the room, the sewer, and let's just maybe, if we each go through on our own, the LIP and the MOA, and kind of come back and leave sewer out. Let's not talk about sewer. Let's not talk about Acton. Let's not talk about any of it. Let's leave that out, and the five of us can talk about the rest of it. the other issues within those two documents that concern us, and kind of come to a consensus as to, what are the questions, what would the potential questions be if and when we have Joel come in and sit with us? I don't.
But I'm gonna be point blank with you, Chris. You take the sewer out of there, what are we talking about? Because usually that's a major part of what,
I understand that, I understand that. But what I'm saying is, the MOA is not, there's the clauses like the one was discussed last night. There's any number of things in the MOA that don't have anything to do with sewer.
Right.
I understand, trust me, I understand that, the sewer piece is gonna be the piece that either, it's the most important subject in the whole thing. I get that. I'm not arguing that fact, but there are other issues that without, with the fact that Greg isn't gonna be here, that we can kind of get into, and maybe, these are, four of us agree that there's a certain clause or a certain section of the MOA that we don't like, then that's obviously, that's a topic to go after if and when Joel comes. Obviously, the sewer issue is something that, we'll have plenty of time to fight about.
To the sewer issue, I think we need a firm memorandum from legal counsel on whether or not they believe there's any chance the state can order us to provide sewer.
Yeah,
If we
but
say
I don't
no.
think they know that. That's the problem. They
But if
can't
there's-
give you a straightforward
But
answer.
if people in town are saying it's an absolute no, then we have to do our due diligence with our own town council and get our own opinion. Even if that chance is 1%, that's gonna affect all of our decisions in weighing our options. I just think we need to know, and we need to have them research it thoroughly and say, hey, there's no case on point, but these three are really close, or there is a case on point, and this is what it says and how it might be applicable in this situation. Because we all need to make an informed decision, and I think that's a huge part of it, because if we wanna flat out say no, we need to know that there's no chance it's gonna come back to bite us down the line, and we didn't throw, all the mitigation money out the window.
Down the drain.
Yeah, exactly.
The only, I don't think that Adam Costa has presented us with an example of it.
Nope.
But I also know in talking to so many people, and then we were at a meeting on Friday that Greg was at. This dynamic of this thing straddling two towns is almost unheard of in the state of Massachusetts, and with the HDHC and the way they rule and the things that they rule on, I would be concerned, and they won't answer you, by the way, until it's before them, so they don't answer questions on a what-if basis. They don't give you, and this is from both Adam Costa, everybody in town government that we've spoken to in our own town government and elsewhere, and the special counsel for 129 Parker Street, that the HDHC does not answer questions on what-ifs. They only make a decision on stuff that comes before them. But the part to me that's worrisome, if I'm a person who's not wanting to sell sewer, is that this is, would they force us to sell sewer, given that the project is in our town, and you're there, you might as well provide it for the rest.
They will require us, and I have no opposition to providing sewer for the Maynard residents, but they will not require us.
No, I'm not saying that, but that's that.
The legal position.
But
That says the only people that can force you to sell sewer to another town is the state legislature.
Yeah, I recommend that I let our town council review that
Yeah,
before we present it as a public document.
I would recommend that town council speaks to our council.
So be it.
Speaks to who?
Their council.
103 Gorman Brooks.
I don't know who they are.
Phone number.
They're big.
Okay, all right, that's.
I think the point is the fact that it hasn't been done.
Yes, it just,
And the fact that
That's my, it's,
Yeah,
it's.
I think the point is it can't be done. It cannot be forced.
Maynard
We
has
don't- but we
been
don't know
in the
that.
forefront
We-
before. They
I-
may
The
be-
attorney says they have no authority.
but a 4DB project is
They
different,
have
and,
no authority.
oh, okay, but you're not our town council, you're not an attorney, with all due respect, and that's why I'm saying we have town council on retainer for this purpose, and they need to do research and present a memo to the board so that we can make a recommendation
I
and write.
agree with that, and I had some research done, that's a point. There could be other points.
Right.
But at least it's in writing, get something else in writing, fine.
I get that, and very frequently, two attorneys in the same room do not have the same opinion on things, so.
I would hope our council will support
So,
Maynard and not
all I'm saying
support,
is that whatever I say about it, I'm not making it up out of whole cloth.
I know you're not. I'm not saying you are.
I think our town council is hired to support Maynard.
and
So
I
that's
just hope
not
that they
even-
support Maynard.
Yeah,
well,
but I think in
yes.
this situation, unfortunately,
Okay,
they don't know
all right.
the right answer, and they can't give us, they're not giving us a
But
straightforward
they
answer,
don't
because they don't
want,
have
they
one.
don't want Maynard to be, they don't want
Oh,
to
no,
hurt
I,
Maynard, is
of
what I'm
course not.
saying,
Well,
so.
they're
I
hired
mean-
by us, they should be representing us.
Exactly, that's exactly it, that's all I'm saying. Okay.
And my point was just, I don't think we can have that sewer discussion without even having that opinion, so.
But I think to Chris's point, we should still continue talking, because I think the only way we're gonna be able to come to eventually to a conclusion is we somehow or another, we're all gonna agree to something.
No, it's not,
Okay.
it's gonna go,
I just want to look at
it's gonna go to him and
It
he's
is, I
gonna.
think it is probably public records now you started reading it, but.
I
Alright,
told
fine,
him,
I
I
didn't-
didn't even look at the name, I don't even
Sorry.
know who
Well,
wrote it.
still,
It's nothing to do with
I have
me.
no idea, I didn't actually see
You
who
can
the
have
attorney
it.
was.
Okay, well, it's still public record
It'll
if
be
it comes to
public
me.
record, but he.
We're not in executive session, so anything
Send it
that's
to- send
provided
it off to-
document-wise is public.
Just please, could you please send the document presented by Mr. Calabria off to town council for review?
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's also the consent
Sorry.
agenda.
All right, so, I don't know, unless everybody wants to have the same redundant argument about sewer next week, we can, the next meeting, we can do that again, or we can kind of look at some other areas and, get some more information on the sewers and.
I think we can, I actually think we can do both.
see
I
who
think
wants to
if we
come in and talk
start,
about it.
I think if we start with the rest, because there is still a lot in the document
There's a
that
lot,
needs to be looked at.
even
So-
non-money wise, just some of the language is atrocious and like very anti-Maynard, so I think we could strike a lot there. And I just met with the historical commission before coming here, and they have feedback on what they want to do with those
With
two
the houses,
houses.
yeah.
The schools have feedback, there's definitely people with traffic impact concerns and how we can mitigate that and, what else we could ask for. So I think there's a lot of areas we could address.
Just make sure that if we include the two houses, that we figure out what the cost of running those two houses are, so we can take it off the revenue.
The cost of what?
There would be a cost of operation of two homes, of a house, if they made,
Well, yeah, only if we kept them. I mean, there's a lot of options. I
yeah,
think, with the
that's my point. If we accept it, there's a cost. So we have to remember costs. So just because, 129 Parker wanted to give us a big building for a senior home, and, everyone thought it was a great idea until they learned that it was filled with asbestos in a $2 million project. So we have to
I think
learn
this
from
is
history.
different. I think this is
We
more the
learn from history, and
historical aspect.
we recognize that, there are consequences to decisions.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why we're gonna set aside so much time next time to discuss.
Yeah, why don't we just do that?
Yeah, okay,
Sounds good.
all right. Word sewer's banished from the meeting next week, on the 2nd. Anyone that utters the word sewer will be banished from the room. By
Does that mean I
vote,
can
by
go
vote,
home?
by vote only. You
Does
have
that
to
mean I can
vote.
go
I-
All right.
With all due respect, I don't think you can discuss this issue without that word being used.
That's right. I would agree, but we still need to, there's
There's
still
so
other-
much more
there's
to
still
the
other
project
issues
as
that
well.
we can
Yes.
look at while we, All right, so, anybody have any, questions on the chairman's report? Or the
Town administrator.
administrator's report, where is it?
Hey, how you doing? I'm the town administrator.
You're still here?
TA report, yeah, well,
No, so,
what pages?
it's, if you don't have any questions, I have nothing to tell you, except that to officially notify the board and the public of my pending paternity leave, starting tomorrow morning, for a minimum
Congratulations.
of 2 weeks until October 3rd. But that also depends on my wife's recovery time and that's, so,
Okay,
Sounds good. Congratulations.
thank you so much.
thanks.
I don't think I had anything from
Just let us know what happens, that's all. We'll all be waiting. So I asked the two questions of Aaron. I have another question. And it actually came up in relation to somebody that was at the football game where the incident that led to the breaches being enclosed and on and on and on. But one of the parents of the football, one of the kids that played football, was talking about, when, grandparents come, we only get 3 home games a year, and people won't even be able to come because they won't have stands. And I said, why don't you have 3 games? You only have 3 games. They play 10, and they only have 3 home games. And I guess the issue was, well, the fields are too expensive, so I don't know what they charge for fields, but I'm just trying to find out, like, I know Crow Park, there's all sorts of baseball that takes place there, there's all sorts of soccer at Rockland, there's kids at the Roosevelt School. Do we know, can we find out if everybody pays for every field every day?
Yeah, we can look into that, of course.
Like, I don't think that they do. Like, I don't know that we charge Little League a fee to use Crow Park.
Crow Park, yeah.
Like, I don't think we get paid for that. They have to provide a certificate of insurance and other things. I don't know, I'm just trying to find out who we charge and who decides who we charge and who we don't charge for these things.
So who's charging them for the football field, the high school?
So-
I mean, the.
Wait, so we might have I don't want to give my official response yet.
I don't
As far as
know who
Crow
checked.
Park, we've already approved a number, so Becky does process those requests.
Do we bill them?
Don't. What
Right.
the Babe Ruth does for the spring softball, baseball that they play at those fields, the parents, the men of that league.
Men and
have
women, I'm
children's,
sure.
They provide their labor, and they provide a lot of the fertilization and different things for the field. They're out there every spring cleaning it. It helps our DPW crew. If you talk to Mark Curry and Aaron, they could give you a full-blown detail of how much work those parents put into that field and keep up with it.
So for that particular group, it sounds like in kind.
Yeah, no, yeah, it just seems to me that, like, we were talking about it, and the parent that I was talking to is involved in the administration of that league and the coaching. He said it's, like, if they have 2 games there on a Sunday, it's $700 a game.
Right, so I won't be able to speak to that, but
That's-
as Andrew is letting me know, and I did understand this to be true, but I don't have the facts, is that there is a fee that the school imposes. So I would have to look into what the school business,
Yeah, so, I mean, like-
to see what they charge. I really don't know.
Right.
So we're on a DPW end of it, so to speak.
Right. That's okay. It just seems,
No, it's a good question. I'm curious too.
For 3 hours of Maynard kids playing football on the high school field is $1,400. Seems excessive, but that's just my opinion.
I'd have to look into it.
Yeah,
And I will.
okay, all right. That's it. That's all I have, other than the other 2 issues that Aaron addressed. Armin, anything?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Gavin?
Yeah, quickly, Greg or Andrew, since you're going to be out tomorrow, Greg, can you speak to Aaron, Andrew, about, if you remember, probably about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I commented on, while I was walking around downtown, down near the Walgreens building, the sidewalk had broken. And that there's a handicap ramp sort of thing on each side of that sidewalk. And on one side, it had cracked and had become dangerous for anybody walking along with a cane or anything like that. So they paved it, and it's still there. It's in somewhat disrepair, but it's paved. The other side, the same thing happened to that little handicap ramp that goes down. You know what I'm talking about when I say it's a little pad? It has like little bumps on it so that a blind person can realize.
I'd have to
that-
look at it just to be entirely sure.
So that's broken and cracked up, and the pieces are flying all over the area. And again, it's dangerous for somebody who might be shuffling, somebody who might have a cane, so if we can do something to repair that, I would think that would be a wise
I think
thing.
we can have Aaron look at it, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're meeting tomorrow on a scheduled meeting, so I'll make sure.
Yeah, it's,
There you go.
I noticed it when I was out for a walk the other day, and I said,
No, absolutely. I get, from time to time, I get requests similarly from other residents. And,
yeah.
and we
Oh, I
usually
know,
just-
I know you
Yeah.
you appreciate that.
No, that's
so-
what I'm saying. So, yeah, please, I welcome.
Yeah. That's it.
Melissa?
I don't have anything.
Justine?
Yay, it's me. First thing I have is, I have 2 things, if I can. You can.
You have a minute
First
more.
is that I attended the first budget subcommittee meeting along with Greg and Andrew last week. It was a good first start. I think that we're all eager to really kind of dig into the numbers and really kind of get an idea and get a handle on how the budget works, so when we move forward and when we move to the actual presentation of the budget, that we can, basically town-wide, we can understand that everybody is on the same page with things. And so the next meeting is actually the 26th, somewhere here. It might be in the finance room. But I look forward to, and David wasn't able to make it, but I look forward to having him on the board as well, and it should be good. So, and then I also wanted to say a quick thank you to the police and fire that went up to help out in Lawrence and Andover and North Andover. They make us really proud, and they make us proud anyways, but the fact that they did that and responded when needed, I really appreciate that too. So I want to say thank you.
Good point.
Did you say the next meeting is 26th?
Second, 26th.
No, the next meeting is your
26th.
meeting,
No,
the other meeting, yeah.
The next,
Oh, the
Is it
budget.
26th or 25th? I'm sorry.
25th.
25th, I
Okay,
apologize.
so I just checked my calendar. 26th is open house at the house.
That's what it was. Sorry,
I
25th.
panicked for a second.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Next meeting is October 2nd.
There you go.